I think it was on one of the bonus episodes. The three of us were just hanging out, and I told you two about some graphs been popping up in South London. I told you about there's the guy who like scribbles over everything with Quran references and
Oh,
just
the
like tagging
Batman
over.
one?
He's like, yeah, it was the Batman. Exactly. And I also told you there have been some like communiques from, well, they've been signed off by some anarchists in South London. And so there was one a while ago, to recap, there was one a while ago that we pasted up that said like organized but not with unions. It was just like, okay, good luck everyone.
Organize by yourself at home.
Yeah, organize alone. Organize alone at home.
Make a Discord.
In a bed shaped like a race car. And then there was graffiti down in Peckham on a big wall to be super visible, that was like smash the Old Kent Road tube extension. And I was like, okay, I feel like this is maybe a bit misguided. I put an Instagram story on my, like, I put a reel on my Instagram story where I was just like, guys, I don't know if I actually like hate the Old Kent Road tube extension as a concept. Like, public transport in South London sucks complete ass. Like, it gulps swallows whole turds. It's so bad here. Like, actually, if like if they did the tube extension as a result of gentrifying, like they built a bunch of like horrible high-rise, new build luxury apartments, and like no one could afford them, and it could have been social housing, but it wasn't, obviously, and it was gentrifying. Then they put in tube extension. This would be a sign of bad stuff, right? But it would not itself be the thing we should be fighting. Like actually we should be fighting the developments, not the public transport. And then so I have an update on South London graffiti, that someone hit a bus stop near me, and I'm sure it was some anarchists in South London, just from the style. They'd made a stencil, and it was really obvious just from immediately from looking at it that they thought that if you have a stencil and you use a spray can, you just and it's done and it's going to be perfect.
Oh yeah.
First time immediately. And so it was just a horrible mess. Like, it just looked so bad. I'm sorry.
I saw it on Sophie's story. It's really
cracked
bad.
me up. It was really bad. They had like the TFL logo and it was smashed, but then because of the how badly the spray had gone through the stencil, like, and leaked everywhere, you couldn't really see the parts where it was smashed. So it was just
couldn't
like
tell
the
what
TFL
that was.
logo up.
I had no
was
idea what
like,
that was when I saw it.
Yeah, if you could even tell. Exactly.
It's like
anyway.
that thing when you if you're making a stencil or whatever, and if you're going to do this, you should always practice at home first. But if you start by spraying on top of the stencil, like if you put the stencil up and you spray directly into the middle, which a lot of people think would be a good idea, there's a concentrated thing of paint that just goes in there and then just like bleeds out behind it and drips down. So what you got to do is spray off. Like, what you want to do is kind of come across evenly like this, like across the entire picture, like that. Really nice and even.
Great
like that.
hand
And then
control
you'll get
tips from Tim.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
that's how you get a nice clean stencil.
Some anarchists in South London, if you're watching, pay attention to this. This is the way.
Love the energy, work on the execution.
The energy is great. This is the thing I want. Like, this is why I feel bad for laughing, because I'm ultimately like, I love the energy. I love like how hard we're coming at like modern developments, like shit. Like, that's great. That's fun. They have some like really intense like slogans about like the development like burying us or something. Like, I can't remember it all now, but it was all like, it was good energy. But seeing this really messy stencil job actually made me go like, hang on, like, I actually don't know loads about the Old Kent Road tube extension, and to be honest, I would love it because it would be like a nearer for me. Like, it would be a nearer than like all my current public transport links, and improve things loads. And so I want to look it up. And in the process of looking it up, found out that like it's not actually funded and it's not actually underway. And
it's just not happening.
It's just not actually
pre-smashed then
happening. Yeah, it comes pre-smashed. And in finding out it was not happening, I just felt such an intense disappointment that I was like, I think that this like anti-civ radical anarchist graffiti has made me want the tube extension here more than if I'd never seen it. Like,
it is an interesting angle to go for. public transport in like, like obviously like a working class area or whatever. Yeah, bold strategy. We'll see.
We love the energy. Let 2025 be a year of refinement and like picking your battles better, maybe. It's Red Planet. It's 2025. We're doing it for another year. We can't be stopped.
We'll never be stopped.
Let's start with the question we can't stop asking. What was the most based thing you did? Or just what you've been up? It's been the holidays. What have you been up to, Tim?
The most base thing I have done in the last sort of, I don't know, like I think it was about a week ago now was I've mentioned it before on stream. It's come up a couple times. It has been my base thing a couple times as well. I have always had like a kind of personal policy wherever I've been working that if someone has a tattoo associated with like abuse, like usually it's something done under duress or by an abusive partner or something like that, then I'll just cover it up for free. We'll just figure something out and I'll just do it. And yeah, so I did one of those about a week ago, which was good. It had been a little while. It's like it's weird. Sometimes I'll go through it, I'll be doing like multiple a month, and then sometimes I don't do one for ages and ages. So that's always good because I think there's always like a thing when it's like this I guess like this mental weight that people have on them when they have something like that on their body, and it kind of like in a lot of times that I've done it, it has been something that has been on them for a really long time. So yeah, good to get that out and start 2025 refreshed with no clearing out the bad vibes.
So I have like 4 tattoos from an abusive relationship that like I'm sure there are tattoo artists in London I could go to who probably have the same policy as you, actually, now I think about it.
Yeah, there are. It is like sometimes people will do it just for like they'll just charge their minimum charge and then just do whatever it takes. Some, like obviously you're probably looking at artists that you are probably already aware of that share, like pretty similar politics to us and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people that don't have these policies, so I wouldn't expect anyone to be able to like walk into a shop and just be like, hey, does anyone do this or anything like that. It's it is
okay,
it's not exactly commonplace, but
I'll
you
bear
might
it in mind.
be able to find someone.
Backup option, I'll fly to New Zealand.
Yeah. I mean, you might get a good deal on a flight where it might even be cheaper than paying to get the tattoo.
That's true.
So, but yeah, so that was fun. To start off the year with that. What about Mule? What have you been up to?
Thanks, Tim. I have been in hibernation mode, big bear hours, just like not really doing a lot whatsoever. My birthday rolled around in the middle of December, and from then on, I was like, yeah, I'm just not going to do anything like at all. I'm just going to chill. I'm just going to like tell stories by the fire, hang out with people that I love, and spend a lot of time with them. And it was really, really good. Like I was saying before the show started, we were just chatting. Had a great birthday. It was really cool. Sophie came up to see me, and that would have been like genuinely enough if Sophie and her partner would have just come up on their own, but like I had a bunch of friends come and hang out, and that was really, really nice. And yeah, like I've also like taken the time to sort of like, I don't know, get like a little bit more radicalized. I think I said on the last show before the end of the year that the place that I'm working, turns out they're one of the biggest investors in fucking Elbit systems. More and more just over the holidays, my brain has just been going, yeah, you're not going back there, bro. That's not happening. You ain't going back. And it got
some Disco Elysium shit. You're not going back there.
It's literally
not going back to work in January.
It's literally what it was. It's literally what happened. So that voice has just been getting louder and louder. And I was actually ill over New Year, which really fucking sucked because I had a really cool New Year's Eve night out planned, but it doesn't matter, it's fine. So I was ill for like a week, and I was just like hanging out with my partner and like her brother, and then like hanging out on my own quite a bit. And so I had to like phone in sick, but actually like I was genuinely sick for like the first couple of days, but then like the last 2 days, I've just not shown up, and I've just not phoned anyone, and I don't care. And I've decided what I'm gonna do. I've already done it. I've got the petition made and ready to go. I'm gonna log on tomorrow morning. I'm gonna fire this email across to like everybody in all the different departments that I know that my email has access to, get them to sign the petition, read out, like, have like a bit of text explaining what it's about. And I'm just going to speak to my boss, and I'm just going to be like, sorry, I'm not fucking doing this anymore, dude. Like, this is why I'm quitting. You can't do anything about it because this company sucks, and this is what I'm going to do. If you do value this shit and you do want to make a difference, then please, encourage people to speak up about what's going on within the company after I'm gone, because that would just be really, really good. And then just see like what happens from there. I don't know, but basically, yeah, I'm just gonna have to either find a new job or start streaming, or both again. So so that's the most base thing that I've done over the holiday period, and I'm gonna be sort of trying to execute that in some fashion tomorrow. What about you, Soph?
That's really exciting and really based, and I'm really proud of you. I'm like, I know you've been struggling with that so much, and like, it just does sound so depressing, and especially finding out like how specifically how they're complicit in genocide. I know it's been weighing on you so much, and I'm just very excited for you that's coming.
Thanks,
have I done anything based? I mean, it has also been the holidays, hibernation mode, Christmas, New Year's. I chilled out. I cooked a lot. Cooked a lot of new stuff. Cooked for friends. That's always lovely. It's nice building community up. It's nice seeing people. I've been getting really into stargazing. So if you're following my socials, you might spot a bit of stuff I've been doing there. It's been really cool to realize, like, even with the light pollution of London, you can actually provided it isn't like full cloud cover, you can usually see multiple planets in the sky like any given night, and that's really, really cool. And last night actually, my girlfriend and I went up to a big hill in a park that we know, and it was super clear, and like the moon was super bright, so we knew that it was just spectacular on its own. The sky was darkening, like Jupiter became visible next to the moon, and I knew that Mars was going to come up over the horizon because I've been like looking into more and more of this stuff. And then over the other way, like Venus was really, really bright, and it was also going to be like Saturn next to it, but it wasn't visible yet because it wasn't bright enough. So like watching the sky slowly dim until these like the faintest little dot, and then you're like, I think I see it, and then it's like oh, I do see it. It's really, really faint, but it is actually there. And like spotting loads of constellations. Then my girlfriend actually looked up like satellites that would be orbiting overhead. So last night we saw the rocket body of a satellite that was launched in 2012 by the US Navy, just like zip over London really fast in like a couple of minutes, just watching it go across the whole sky. That was gorgeous. Not particularly based. I'm just very excited about it. And I've bought myself long enough to think of a base thing I have actually done, because I have a base New Year's resolution. I've been saying for ages about the two things that are near me that I want to get involved in and do some actual hours put in organizing, going to meetings, taking part in stuff. And they are London Renters Union and the Harm Reduction Hub. We talked to Sina from RATS a little while ago, who's helping to run the Harm Reduction Hub. And I have signed up and will be going to my local branch meeting of Renters Union and volunteering at the Harm Reduction Hub a bit starting this month, and hopefully more and more throughout the year. So that's my most base thing, my base New Year's resolutions. Yeah, but we want to know what base things you've been doing, listener, viewer, etc. So you can message us on Twitter. Do we still have a Twitter? Or message us on Twitter. Message us on you know what? I'm going to review the social media stuff that we have, and we can revisit this next episode. Send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. In this segment here, we'll tell people what you've been up to, and it'll be very exciting. But for now, we're going into the news. Tim, why don't you tell us about South Korea?
Yes, so the last episode that we did before the end of the year, we talked about how there had been a ill-fated attempt at imposing martial law in South Korea. So yeah, it was it was a bit of a mess. So the President Yoon tried to push through martial law to allow himself special powers to basically entrench himself. And kind of like there was a lot of political unrest happening at the time. We went through that in the early episode about how he was under a lot of, like, he was under investigation. So was his wife, and a lot of his good friends were as well. And it was basically their ticket out. They were like, we gotta pull this off. We gotta consolidate power. We gotta get rid of some of our enemies, sort of in parliament and outside of it. They tried to say that there was kind of like these outside instigators interfering with their democracy and all this kind of stuff. They made some vague claims about North Korean interference. There was a lot of stuff blaming like woke universities and feminists and all this kind of stuff. In general, it's a very kind of YouTube reactionary kind of vibe that they had going on over there, which is actually funny because other opposition politicians have literally said that. Even there was another conservative politician in South Korea who has said that Yoon needs to get off YouTube and deal with like the real world, which I think is pretty hilarious. But
South Korean premier Sargon of a cat.
yeah, exactly. It has been like this whole thing has been very like all his supporters the majority of them are young dudes in their 20s and 30s that like very Trump pilled and all this kind of stuff. So where we last left off, they had just successfully put through the impeachment vote. They tried it. I think they tried it twice, and on the second time they were able to get it. And so they had issued a warrant for his arrest, but they had until the 6th to actually apprehend him. But he's been holed up in his house, literally surrounded by military police. So there's military police, sympathetic kind of, like protesters and stuff like that, and then just like his own actual private security team. So they've been basically barricaded around his house to stop anyone from getting in a gigantic human chain. So so a bunch of normal police and CIO officers went to go and arrest him, and they basically just couldn't get through. And they were like, they cited that they were worried about the safety of their officers, but also they were trying to avoid a significant escalation because, like this is private security and military personnel and stuff. And we'll get into some more stuff about the military in a little bit regarding this. Like they did have pretty good reason to be worried about significant escalation. So they weren't able to arrest
if I'm hearing it so far correctly, the incel revolution in South Korea promised that it was going to be strong and domineering and take over everything by force, be big and powerful, and then lasted for about 2 minutes.
Absolutely. They like
sounds in character.
There's some interesting stuff about that that we'll get into in a second. But yeah, so they weren't able to arrest him before the warrant expired on the 6th. So then they reissued another one a couple days later, which is still valid. But yeah, like his lawyers were trying to get that nullified, but the court basically struck that down, and they were like, no, like we're not fucking around. Like we got to get him. So so groups of young conservative men have been camping out outside of his house since then. So they're, saying that they will personally block all the investigators. And it's really similar. Like even some of them have these signs that say "Stop the Steal." Like they believe that their democracy is being stolen from them from outside forces. And there's, like if you look at some of these pictures of their encampments, they have pictures of Trump and Yoon together. And there is this, they believe that as soon as Trump takes office, that he's going to do or say something to support Yoon and kind of like, you know, like, I don't know, like he's gonna, like Daddy Trump's gonna make it all okay or something like that. Like he's just gonna sign something and be like,
they got their own
America
QAnon.
Supports. Yeah, exactly. You know, and it kind of seems like Trump just doesn't really like, has no idea any of this is happening.
He doesn't give a fuck. I'm sorry, but like, you know, young conservative men camping outside his house, just, it broke me in a way that I wasn't ready for. Like, just that sentence.
Imagine the smell. I know it. I know it's crazy in there. I know.
They don't need to do much blocking because they just have this wall of like pungent, you know, horrific.
Well, I'm just thinking about when Trump was meeting with Xi Jinping, who's like infinitely more of a significant power in the region. I remember that story about them briefing Trump and telling him it's she. I know it's spelled XI, but it's she, like a woman.
Yeah.
That was how they explained it to Trump. And I'm just like, he can't remember who Yoon is. There's no way.
Yeah, absolutely not. So yeah, so they've been obsessed with this like this idea that there is this conspiracy from like, you know, like secret communists in North Korea and like feminists, which I mean, in the kind of, I don't know, the Korean QAnon kind of mind, all these things are connected. You know, this is the woke DEI revolution that is stealing their country or some shit like that. But so yes, since the initial attempt at imposing martial law, well, actually, so when they actually put it through, there has been evidence that has come out of an actual like gigantic conspiracy, except it is Yoon and his buddies who have been the conspirators. So they've been planning this attempt for a long time. So it goes back over a year or so, but there's all kinds of evidence. There's like leaked emails, handwritten notes, sworn testimony, overheard conversations, all kinds of things where people are like, yeah, all these guys were very clearly planning something for a long time. Like there was, and they even were doing simulated training exercises of how they were going to do it, you know, like with like what steps they were going to take and how they were going to react to like kind of like civil unrest and stuff. The interesting thing is though that they just were not, like they did not think that they would face the level of resistance that they actually did. They just thought that it would be kind of like, you know, some civilians would be like, you know, please don't do this, and they'd be like, well, no, you know, like we're the army or whatever. And so yeah, there's evidence in September.
They were expecting like dyed-haired feminists being like,
exactly.
I can't fight you because I don't believe in violence. No, oh no, everything's terrible. And instead they just go like, everyone's uncle was just stop it. This is embarrassing.
Yeah. And it was like interesting as well seeing you know, those videos that we saw of the soldiers being turned around by civilians, and it's kind of like, you know, like these soldiers obviously just were not prepared, you know, for what they were going to face. But yeah, it is interesting. So Yoon had been, and his team had been working really closely with the HID, which is the Headquarters Intelligence Detachment. So this is actually like their kind of version of like, you know, it's like the SAS or something like that, except their job is basically like, they're the North Korea team. They're the team that they send into North Korea to like, you know, assassinate people or to, you know, like do any kind of like sabotage or anything like that. So they're kind of like South Korea's highest kind of like most dangerous little team or whatever. And so apparently because of their unique skill set, their, you know, their excellence in hand-to-hand fighting and all this kind of stuff, Yoon was like, we need these guys to be working with us. And so on the day when it all kicked off, they deployed teams of these guys all around the city to kind of put down civil unrest, which is wild, like to be like, okay, before the police or anything like that, we're sending our super elite assassin squad to go and, you know, like put down any kind of like, you know, any civilians that get too jumpy or whatever. But it turns out that they they weren't really prepared to do that. I don't know if they thought that maybe just their presence was going to be enough, or if the HID guys were actually just like, hey, what the fuck? Like, I'm not going to shoot a bunch of civilians or whatever. Which is wild, because it also kind of speaks to a level of like they knew they were doing something like pretty fucked up, right? So and some other interesting things that have come out is that Yoon actually got in touch with an old friend, Ro Sang-won. So this guy he has a extensive history in military intelligence. He is like a spy master kind of dude, but he got dishonorably discharged for sexual assault and went to jail. And then Yoon was like, actually, I'm going to get this guy back off the record. He's the guy that is planning my little revolution, And it's a real kind of like, all the stuff you see in like Handmaid's Tale about them plotting behind the scenes about how they were going to kick off this stuff. It really is kind of like that, because it was like a series of meetings where Ro was meeting with people from different parts of the military as a civilian, but under kind of like he'd been given this authority by Yoon and some other people to basically plan this little revolution. He was meeting up with like armored brigades, like literal like tank divisions and he was meeting them at fast food restaurants to have these like little clandestine meetings, and them being like, like them taking orders from a civilian, a disgraced civilian, which is it's just pretty wild. So so he met with these
fucking
like
unhinged.
Like the armored brigades is like really interesting, because they basically were saying they were like, the National Assembly is gonna come down hard against us with this. So if we need to, like they literally said, we need to crush the National Assembly with tanks, like which is deranged. But it also kind of reads to me as like quite a fantasy, like they did have this kind of they had this idea about this like triumphant little coup, and then they were going to like erase the National Assembly by literally destroying it with tanks or something like that, and pave the way for their new fucking, I don't know, incel fucking South Korea. But so they even found there was a Defense Intelligence Command Chief that No Sang-won, who had left a bunch of handwritten notes that they found documenting their plan to stage a false flag attack at the northern limit line, which is like the maritime boundary between North Korea and South Korea's kind of territory. And so, like literally talking about staging this false flag attack, which is probably what Yoon was alluding to when he talked about North Korean interference and things like that. He was saying that there was like some stuff going on, but he couldn't really say anything in particular. So I feel like maybe he was hoping that was going to go ahead, but it never did. So it kind of just looks like he's just saying stuff. And so the South Korean Intelligence Command was also busted. They made a gigantic order for hundreds of precise imitations of North Korean military uniforms. So the order never actually got to them for some reason. I'm not sure exactly. Like all of the news of this is all in Korean, so it's like kind of hard to pass. But so they were planning a false flag attack. They had got all these because so the
how
thing
do you explain that to the retailer? Are you just like, well, it's a party that we're doing a rave and the theme is like,
so the interesting thing is they said that it was for a training exercise, but they weren't. They actually have a supplier where they have like fake North Korean uniforms that they regularly get them from, and they don't look exactly the same. They are like very specifically like, these are training uniforms or whatever. So they already had a source for that. They have a bunch of these uniforms, but instead they went for these like very kind of like there's I actually found a thread on Twitter where they broke down the difference between them, and like the ones that they were getting made were like really, really precise imitations. Like there's very specific.
God, where's
things.
Alex Jones when you actually need him? Like,
I know, right?
It's InfoWars. You would have loved the Incel Revolution.
So it's like really interesting because it's like, oh, okay, but then why didn't you go through your normal supplier, or why didn't you use the uniforms that you normally do that say like, it's like the same thing where it's like DPRK and then it's like training or some shit like that on it, So it's like what's all this, And so and then, so former Capital Defense Command Chief Kim Do-gyeon, so he was the one that got arrested. He actually backed up this kind of stuff and saying that so the HID, which this is that secret department that that had been working with you and the guys that bust into North Korea, that he said that HID personnel may have disguised themselves as North Korean soldiers to instigate internal chaos. So and another lawmaker, Kim Byung-ju, also said in an interview that disguised HID agents may have been part of a conspiracy to stage a riot or assassinate prominent individuals in order to create chaos within South Korea. And so this kind of is pretty gnarly because there was also a list of opposition lawmakers that they were like, these are the guys that are going to stop us. Like these, if anyone has the kind of the authority to kind of, or like the popularity to stop what we're doing, it'll be these guys. So it's like, damn, was that like a hit list that they just never got around to? So it's pretty wild. So all this stuff kind of shows how far that Yoon and his administration were willing to go to kind of lie and pretend that North Korea was a threat to their country, and that's what they needed to respond to, when really the call was coming from inside the house the entire time. But so that's all the stuff that's been going on. He still hasn't actually been arrested. The warrant is still out there though. So we'll see what happens as it goes. But I just thought that it's really funny to me that all the stuff that happens in South Korea is the kind of stuff that people say happens in North Korea, but they never have any evidence for, like all like the secret, just all this kind of like all the uniforms and all this kind of stuff is pretty ridiculous. But it turns out that their homegrown conspiracies are dangerous enough.
Absolutely wacky. Absolutely wacky.
But speaking of insane internal chaos, conspiratorial bullshit. So what's happening in America?
Well, thank you for telling us about Korean QAnon. Now it's time to get back to QAnon Classic. So over the break, there has been what's been deemed the MAGA Civil War. Internal conflict in Trump's base as top figures come out in support of America's existing immigration policies. So basically what's happened here is that there is a big factional divide in MAGA between, well, what's interesting about it is that like most of the popular base are racists. That's the nature of being MAGA. That's the whole thing. And so like to call it a factional divide is kind of interesting because like the faction who are on the side of the H-1B visas are like in one way like a different kind of psychopath altogether, because they want to like seize power in this like calculated fascistic conspiracy in fact, but they don't even care about the kind of like racist, what's the word liberals are always loving to use, demagoguery that Trump's been like running on for the last like 12 years or whatever. It's for them it's just about the specific machinations of power. And I think that it's kind of interesting to look at it as an almost like ruling class working class split within MAGA, like almost like it's not exactly, because there are plenty of like bourgeois grifters. Trump himself has like equivocated over this whole thing because he knows that he's like, I think he must get at this point that he's in like that kind of cult leader position where everyone around him has to say like, I agree with the great leader and I think that we hate H-1B visas, and another person has to say, well, I disagree with you because the real position of the great leader is this. So like Trump's been like very like carefully even-handed, two-faced. Pick your verbiage here. About this. So, over the new year and as Trump's inauguration nears, we see the conflict between factions within the Trump campaign. Leaders of the Doge, Department of Governmental Efficiency, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, both declared support for the H-1B visa, an employment-based immigration scheme in the United States, running against popular sentiment among supporters of President-elect Donald Trump, whose base is drawn from the most extreme parts of the traditionally racist, isolationist, anti-immigration Republican voter base. Yeah, I don't know if I have more to say on the basis of this. They like, okay, so I'll explain the specific context to it, which is that like Musk and Ramaswamy both came out saying like the H-1B visa is good. This was after attacks from people remember Laura Loomer. I've got here, I've put in my note as like alt-right figure Laura Loomer, who has oscillated for the last decade between total obscurity and baffling prominence. I don't know if anyone's been paying attention to Loomer for the last minute. Like, she was barely a name player in the original alt-right surge. Like, she was such a weird side figure. And she's come around to like, as Trump was running, he was like, I think she's great. I think she's real neat. There was like rumors going around that they were having an affair, which like,
yeah. It was pretty interesting.
She's had a bunch of plastic surgery in the way that like looks like a Trump wife kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then a bunch of people were like, do not hire her onto your campaign. She is the most unhinged bitch in the entire world. There's no way that will go well for you. And he like backpedaled on it really fast. I don't know. Yeah, Tim, you saw some of this.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because like, as far as I'm aware, she's never done anything that anyone has really considered like valuable, right? Like, she's never.
He was around Kanye for 2 seconds, I think.
Yeah,
between like Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, like
she changed herself to the doors
grifters.
Twitter, and
she changed herself
to
the doors. That was a big thing. She kept on pestering Paul Joseph Watson for a date a few years ago, like publicly. It was really gross.
Yeah, like this kind of thing where it's like she has this huge and like internet following just of, you know, like people that just don't really, I don't know, like people that don't care. Like they just want someone that is like gonna stick it to the woke or something like that. They don't actually care like what they do or who they are. And it's kind of like just floated upwards on this kind of like balloon of that kind of bullshit. So it's wild to see her get all the way up to the top, you know, like allegedly being extremely close to Trump. And then it is funny how fickle Trump is. And he says, like, he said in speeches that how he's like, everyone wants to get close to me, like they all want to be my friend, you know. And it's true. And like, so Loomer got close to him, and then people started kind of making fun of her, and he dropped her immediately. Like, even when Musk was really close to him, he still kind of is, but he was like extremely very punishing.
He is such a diva, a queen, and a bitch. Like, Trump is the most prissy. Like, it beggars belief.
People started making fun of the little, you know, like the relationship that they had, like the friendship or whatever like that. And then Trump just like dropped them immediately and was kind of like, who's this? Like, what is this? You know, like, so I think Trump is very sensitive to, you know, like being, I think like the other people around him affecting his own reputation, or, you know, like you can imagine it kind of like back in the schoolyard or whatever, people would be like, yo, Donald's friends with blah, blah, blah. And he'd be like, I don't even know that guy, you know, like, so, he would
just switch into an alternate reality where he had never met that guy, and that would just be his life from then on.
Like, he wants to be my friend. He wants to hang out with me. I don't know that guy.
Yeah. You probably misheard that he wants to be my best friend. He's been lying and saying that, but that's just
I was doing him a favor, letting him eat lunch at my table. We didn't talk.
Anyway, so Laura Loomer. That's a very good description of how it's been with Laura Loomer, you know, sort of like swung into Trump's orbit on a very like steep elliptical, and then just went and she is now like on her way out. But on her way out, she is criticizing Trump for having appointed Sriram Krishnan as his senior policy advisor on AI. And so Krishnan is Indian born and is a tech entrepreneur, and is just like exactly as with the first time around. Trump wants to fill his cabinet with Wall Street guys, business guys. He loves successful people, and so of course that's the shit he's trying to do. And like Luma is saying like, no, this should be an American doing this, and this is where the H-1B visa discourse started. I think it's like, to draw it back to the ruling class, working class split within MAGA here, like a lot of like working class racists who love Trump, like see him as like being just like us and like talking common sense, and have since the first time around. But like this is, I don't know, like them wanting more exploitable labor, like bringing people over based on employment, and therefore being like more exploitable. Like there's a lot of rhetoric that the pro visa side of MAGA is saying about like America should get the best, like collect the cream of the crop, the top 1% from all around the world or whatever. And yeah, I don't know, just like, yeah, it should be under, like, I don't know if it will kick off any kind of class consciousness for anyone who is already like QAnon pilled. Like, I doubt it. But it's an interesting way to look at it, right? It's like it is kind of a ruling class, working class divide within MAGA, and unfortunately, the working class part of MAGA is still MAGA. So not much use to anyone. I guess like it was interesting to see some of this. There was a Fox News like Fox News put out a thing trying to declare like the Democrats the real losers of all of this, which felt like an incredible cope. Like it genuinely like is a huge internal conflict that is like causing like serious discord within MAGA right now, and Fox News were like, well, you're seeing us resolve our differences calmly like adults, unlike you. It's just like, that's not, no. Where's the line here? Musk, meanwhile, initially refused to back down amid the backlash. Not only did he endorse a social media post bashing R-slurred American workers, but the Twitter owner also profanely told his MAGA critics to, quote, fuck yourself in the face. They're like, they're calmly resolving their differences. It's going really, really well. I don't know. I kind of wonder if it would be very funny if it happened before the inauguration, like by the time he is president, like all of the most powerful people who like Trump has managed to like swirl around him are like trying to do the, like, as I say, like cold and calculated, like the far more psychopathic moves, which is just like the ruling class maneuvers of capitalism, of bourgeois capitalism. But Trump understands his power comes from racists. And so like if they split even before the inauguration, it'd be very funny with him coming in just like universally despised by like every powerful person around him.
I think it should definitely be mentioned a little bit. Elon Musk sort of tweeting about the UK recently, doing a whole.
We have a story getting to that in a little bit.
Bunch of stuff. Yeah. Oh, we actually have a story about that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have a whole separate catching up on Elon story.
That's fine.
And we have the Tesla outside the Trump Tower as well. It's like
I should have known.
Trump and Musk's comedy double act this week, all week.
Okay, I was wrong to assume that we'd have forgotten about that.
Well, you're right to tell us about Northeastern Syria.
I'm right to do that. I'm right about to do that. I'm right to do it. So Northeastern Syria, we were reporting on this at the end of last year, the fall of Assad's regime, in Syria. And obviously there were celebrations by the Syrian people at the defeat and withdrawal of Assad. Obviously, as most people know, a horrific dictator, killed a bunch of his own people with chemical weapons. Just a large cunt, really. Also, obviously, lots of other people were terrified at the potential season of power from various different groups. Obviously, there's a lot of like secular different groups in northeastern Syria, Kurdish and socialists. and the new government that's been formed by members of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, is backed by Turkish mercenaries, and obviously our Syrian comrades are extremely concerned about that and about how the autonomous administration of northeastern Syria is going to deal with any kind of oppression that is going to come from that new government, because obviously the Turkish government, not famously a fan of Kurds, definitely love to just murder Kurds indiscriminately. So completely valid concerns to have by the AANES. So on the 5th of January, an anarchist reporting from northeastern Syria posted a bunch of updates online. So we're going to basically read these out to you. So the first update is that in the Manbij countryside, there have been some clashes. It says here, heavy clashes continued in Manbij countryside, with SDF holding ground against the SNA offensives around Karakoza Bridge and Tishreen Dam. SDF here is the Social Democratic Forces, I think.
Yeah.
And the SNA offenses, I think, are basically... it's not necessarily the HTS, but it's like...
Sorry, it's the Syrian Democratic Forces.
So the SDF is the Syrian Democratic Forces, and they are sort of broadly, a different collection of like militants.
From ANS,
yeah. And the SNA, as I said, not particularly like specifically the HTS, but are definitely like just fascist extremists, essentially, who are like either backed by ISIS or they are like a new formation of ISIS. But we'll get more into that in a little bit, I believe. So, yeah, they've been holding ground against the SNA offensives around Karakoza Bridge and Tishreen Dam. Several armoured vehicles of Turkish proxy forces were destroyed, including tanks and other advanced equipment like radars, even an infamous UAV Bayraktar TB2. The HTS government itself has obviously formed a cabinet, and it is getting filled with leadership full of, basically people in the close circles of someone called Ahmed al-Sharaa. And that person is acting as a de facto president of Syria. Names of important jihadist fighters are being published as heads of ministries and other important state institutions, which is obviously like extremely interesting. Al-Sharaa also announced that HTS will be dissolved and the transition process probably as a strategy to get rid of terrorist label and gain legitimacy as a new government. There have been negotiations between the SDF and the HTS. So a delegation of SDF command met with a delegation of the transitional government, including Al-Sharaa and other relevant HTS members. They negotiated possible integration of SDF into in the new Syrian army that is being organised. An agreement was not reached, but negotiations are remaining open. Syrian National Army facing problems. So two main factions of SNA, which is Sultan Suleiman Shah and Hamza divisions. The Sultan Suleiman Shah and Hamza divisions of the SNA left the SNA coalition to join the ranks of the new Syrian army under the influence of HTS. So we're seeing fractures as well from this main sort of aggressive force from that has come as a result of the instability in Syria. They're now sort of like basically going into the HTS army. Many fighters are dying in the front lines of the Manbij countryside, and other fighters and groups are defecting to return back to their homes, now free of the Assad regime, often getting arrested and imprisoned by SNA military police in the attempt. So that pretty much sucks. Women's resistance. So declarations of the newly appointed Ministry of Women Affairs. Oh wait, hang on. I think I said that sucks, and I'm not sure if it does suck.
Various groups, some of whom themselves suck, but some of whom don't, are being imprisoned by the new regime. It's mixed.
It's mixed. Some of it sucks, some of it doesn't. So the women's resistance, declarations of the newly appointed Ministry of Women's Affairs saying that Islamic law, aka Sharia, should guide Syria, and that she won't let feminist NGOs that don't think like her operate. Many women's organizations, like the newly founded Syrian Women's Council, made statements criticizing it and remarking the role and importance of women in the revolution. So not great moves for the women's-led revolution in in northeastern Syria. ISIS resurgence. ISIS has been increasing their activity and attacking security checkpoints in many different parts of Syria, as well as Iraq. They also spread a call for their followers to do attacks in the US, Europe, or Israel. One message called to prepare your belts, silencers, knives, and explosives. The international coalition has been conducting precise bombings in different locations in Syria. The protests that sparked in several cities after the tomb of a... I should have like a gap in between there. Repression of minorities have been happening as well. The protests that sparked in several cities after the tomb of a historic Alawite scholar was desecrated were met with military repression. Big convoys of HTS fighters being sent to disperse protests. Some clashes with armed protesters were reported. The Druze community also stated their intentions to not integrate their militias into the new Syrian army, challenging the call of a transitional government to surrender all the weapons to the transitional government. So basically, I think that this is, when we're talking about tombs getting desecrated and stuff, this is ISIS activity. I think that's what they're referring to here. Essentially, like ISIS, if you don't know, one of the biggest things that they do is they love to blow up historic sites of basically historical significance. I don't really quite know what the purpose of that is. I think it might just be to sort of like get rid of any sort of I guess like contradiction to Islam or like teachings of the Quran or something like that. I don't quite know what the actual like reasoning for it is. But essentially, yeah, we're seeing like more and more activity from ISIS, which is just gonna happen. Like if you send in this like horrific military force that is designed to repress and attack the revolutionary new societies in northeast Syria.
Yeah. There's kind
which
of like
actually defeated ISIS. It's just going to happen, isn't it?
There's I mean, this is like just a really brief kind of thing, but there's like the official ISIS religious line or whatever is it's like they want to return their like the world of their influence, like where they can control to a very particular time in Islamic history, like when the Prophet Muhammad was kind of around, and they want to get rid of any kind of like any monuments that from other cultures or things that have come after that, or even ones that were before that they just don't believe should be there or whatever like that, and that includes other Muslim sects and all this kind of stuff like that. So it could be anything that basically is not like within this very small kind of window of what they believe, that like their particular kind of branch of what they think it means to be Muslim. So so it could be anything. Like it can be other, sometimes it's like Christian stuff, sometimes it's like other Islamic stuff, sometimes it's like whatever. But that's basically like the ISIS thing is.
There's like it's like the like ISIS had been defeated in northeastern Syria, like concretely by the SDF and by all the people fighting there in the AANES. And again, if you want to learn more, you can check out the fantastic documentary Belkaceba by Conrad Alexis Delimis, who we had on the show. But like HTS, like since they've come in, like one of their things they've tried to sell is like one of their achievements since they've come in is like stopping an ISIS attack, and it's like, right, but guys, wasn't there like no ISIS before you got here? Like, it's strange that you're like stopping ISIS attacks and you're saying that's like, yes, like we're doing really well. We stopped all this ISIS. There was no ISIS before. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's completely fucked. But let's hear a bit from Tim about something not that funny. Sounds funny when you first hear it, but then it becomes not funny.
Yeah. This is like an interesting one, right? I feel like it is like a very like I think there's two powerful images that we have entered 2025 with, and one is the sort of the Tesla Cybertruck exploding outside of Trump Tower, and then the other one is like the Hollywood Hills burning. But yeah, like this is interesting. So
reviewers so far are calling 2025 a bit on the nose.
Yeah, exactly. Like it does remind me of like something like a movie that is, like these establishing shots of a film, like coming into, and like, I mean, I feel like images from both of these events are going to make it into, like movies that are trying to show, I guess, some kind of like world in decay or, fallen empire or whatever. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of you have probably already seen it, the video of the Cybertruck parked out front of Trump Towers, bursting into flames, and then like just exploding, which was at first it was like this really confusing image of like, because we've had so many cases of these cars just bursting into flames anyway, because that's just a thing that they do apparently. But it's a very different kind of fire. So historically, the Cybertrucks and the Teslas that we see, the batteries overheating and they catch fire, whereas this one really exploded. So everyone straight off the bat was like, this is some kind of terrorist attack, and it also coincided with the terrorist attack in New Orleans. That it was like the same day. I think it was within hours. So turns out that inside the Cybertruck was an army soldier, a guy of decent rank, who had apparently already been shot and had died from a gunshot wound inside the burning, exploding Cybertruck, which is like super sus on its head, and a lot of people, including his ex-girlfriend, were like, he was chill. He was like, we've been speaking to him recently. He didn't seem like he was doing anything crazy. I think he'd said in a message to her that he loved driving the rented Cybertruck, that it felt like Halo.
It felt like being Batman or Halo.
Yeah,
I
remember that one. Batman or Halo. Which is wild. But then it turns out he had a pretty extensive little manifesto. He had been using ChatGPT to formulate his plans, so it was pretty easy for people to, like, investigators to access his ChatGPT account and see his history of questions and all this kind of stuff. So it became pretty clear what was going on. It seems like, so this is a guy that he'd been in the army for almost 20 years. He was in his late 30s. He had been deployed numerous times to like Afghanistan and other places. And he said in this manifesto, this was not a terrorist attack. It was a wake-up call. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than a stunt with fireworks and explosives? It's interesting. The manifesto kind of goes all over the place. It's very, I guess, ideologically inconsistent. There is some interesting stuff in there, and then there is some stuff that is just like, oh, this is just like a guy that is like lost it or whatever.
I was at the climbing gym for the first time this year with a friend, and like we were talking about this stuff, and I was just like it was in the phase, it would just happen, so it was in the phase where people were talking about like what a bad vehicle to pick to do a car bombing with the Cybertruck is, because of the it's just like they notoriously explode all the time, and it doesn't do much damage. There's good data on whatever, all this stuff. And like we were chatting back and forth about this, and I was just like, I feel like Luigi has tipped us into an era that might define 2025 of just like the public all kind of critiquing terrorist attacks, like we're watching sports and being like, they should have gone this way, and like they needed to pull this maneuver instead here.
It is interesting. And I mean, so as well as the manifesto, he also had left some notes on his phone. So he had mentioned on there that he needed to cleanse his mind of the brothers he had lost and relieve himself of the burden of the lives that he took, which is like quite interesting. There's a lot of stuff in the manifesto about that as well. There's stuff directly mentioning like war crimes in Afghanistan, and there's like stuff like linked to operations that have to do with the Afghani, like the opium trade over there, which we know that America was very involved with. Some really kind of all over the place stuff, and it is kind of the same as with Luigi, where it's like there is stuff here that is very like salient and very like like he understands this part, or he's coming to an understanding here, but then there's also this other kind of stuff where it's just like this is just like this is kind of terminal, like broken brain sort of stuff. But yeah, so it's kind of an interesting one. The explosion caused minor injuries to 7 people, but pretty much nothing else, no damage to the hotel or anything. They're pretty sure he acted alone. They don't exactly know how he shot himself, ignited the so there was like fireworks and a gas tank in the car, which is where the explosion happened. And parked it up or whatever. Initially, a lot of people were thinking that maybe he had been executed, and then like the Tesla had automatically driven to Trump Towers as part of some kind of message, and that it was like maybe he was a fall guy for some kind of like crimes in Afghanistan, because it did seem like he was remorseful about some things that he had done, and maybe he was going to be a whistleblower or something. But I don't know. I think the more information that came out, like that is something that if that was the case, I could totally believe it, but it does seem like what we have here is something very different. Yeah, I mean, and another parallel that I saw to Luigi as well, that so this guy had spoken to his ex-girlfriend about the pain and exhaustion that he was feeling, that because she was an army nurse actually, and she had attributed the symptoms that he was constantly talking about to a traumatic brain injury that he had suffered in his service, which is interesting. And he was saying that this pain would keep him up at night, and then he found himself reliving these kind of like violent moments from his past, from his military service. And he said, relatively recently, that his life had been a personal hell for the last year. And so, yeah, that's pretty interesting as well, because we saw obviously with Luigi, he was dealing with a significant amount of pain from his back that had kind of pushed him to, like, that was what made him start looking into all the health insurance stuff, obviously, his own personal experiences. But yeah, it's
I mean, I gotta say, like, I've been making a lot of comparisons because of Luigi to the period before the revolutions of 1917 in Russia, like the Soviet revolutions, that like in October by Chen Mieville, he talks about this, and you can actually find something quite comparable to a lot of different revolutions, where like there are working class, like sporadic like acts like this, and like they're not necessarily politically coherent, because like people who act alone are not people who are like organizing with comrades all of the time, right? Because like if they're organizing with comrades, they get a lot more like ideologically like cohesive about what they're doing, and they know that the best way to fight power is to like organize. And then like, I don't know, like it is interesting. Like you're seeing a lot of people who are not, some of them like Aaron Bushnell, obviously like very, very politically cohesive, absolutely like knew exactly what they were talking about. But you're just seeing a lot of people who are like, whose ideology is all over the place, but what they're doing is being measured by everyone else. Like what they're kind of like what their action achieves, right, is like is itself raising a class consciousness, even if like they're not like, even if they just like don't have class consciousness themselves in that way. If that makes sense.
Interesting thing. It's like this unfocused attack towards like the right direction, but they don't, it's kind of like they don't exactly know they don't know where. It's like, okay, they're fighting a boss. They don't know where the weak points are. They don't understand its moveset. They don't know what its weaknesses are. They don't even know if the weapon that they're using is the right, is the optimized weapon. But they're just like, they're taking a shot,
Yeah, just like trial and erroring it, basically.
Yeah. What they need to do is they need to go back out. They need to look for some summon signs. They need to read some notes. They need to,
they need to get the Eldritch Tome of Vladimir Ilyich.
Yeah. They need to, No, but like it is like these kind of like like these real, I guess, like naive attempts at striking back at, they don't understand it as like, capital or imperialism or anything like that. But like that's the vague target that they're aiming towards. Which is interesting. And like you said, I think that we are going to see more of this. And I think that particularly with Luigi, the way that the media handled that, they realized that they couldn't that they couldn't put the plug back in on it. And it seems like over the last like week or two,
did you see the like real possibility of jury nullification? Like they had experts in looking at the case. They were saying like there's a quote real possibility of jury nullification, which I think is so funny because he has like 70% approval rating. Like someone who shot someone in public has a like 70%.
Like he could run for president.
Like, that's what I've been saying. They're trying to find a jury that could convict him, and literally he could be elected. If it wasn't for the age limit, I think is the main impediment.
Yeah. But like that's the thing, right? And I think there has been a significant shift in the way that the media is handling it, where they have like clamped down and they're trying not to put that much information out there. And I think that they're worried that like, promoting these kind of stories is going to lead to more people doing it. But I think, or even just like more sympathizers, not necessarily that there's going to be someone that's going to do a copycat or anything like that. But yeah, it's interesting, like the way that the Columbine shootings set the tone for, like these, like it kind of like ushered in a new era of American kind of violence or whatever. I feel like maybe we're witnessing that now, where it's like,
I mean, to come back around and like what motivates people to do very extreme, often suicidal or like violent things like this. Like there are people who are like, you have to take as a baseline people who are not doing so well, like people who are kind of unwell in some way. And so like expecting them to be super coherent isn't a very sensible expectation actually. But seeing through what they've chosen to do, like what is like most obviously the problem to them is quite interesting. Like seeing that like to Luigi, like he is suffering with this like back pain has been reported on, and then like to him the health insurance CEO is obviously the problem, or like seeing like to this guy who's been exposed to like the horrors of having to like perpetuate the violence of American imperialism overseas. Like he's like, I'm gonna blow something up, like blow myself up outside of like the president-elect's big shiny tower in a Tesla, right? Like I don't know, it's like to compare to Columbine, right? Like that was during this era of like everything being that ridiculous bubble of peace that was established by so much violence within the imperial core. Everything was so chill and good that like you still had people who were not well, people who were isolated and alienated and struggling, but like it's like the target. Well, to go back to your boss metaphor, it's like the targets were invisible. They were completely invisible before, and then like people at least know there is a boss that they're fighting now. That's the kind of difference. Like, but like Columbine is just people turning on their own, like just like school shootings is just people love the phrase like senseless violence, but it's like how much, I don't know.
I think it's like this kind of phenomenon is always driven by very real kind of like like whether it's the friction caused by the contradictions of capitalism or something like that, like there's always some kind of, I think, thing underlying it, and whether it's like an actual like like that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always good or whatever, like like obviously the Columbine shootings and a lot of those other ones that were like they're frustrated kids that like there was kind of like this like era of nihilism or whatever, but there was also like just like like they were also fucking insane white supremacists and all this kind of shit like that, but so I think that it might not even like, it's not necessarily people seeing other attacks like Luigi and like this guy Liebersberger, Matthew Liebersberger, not necessarily just
it's not sorry baby, it's not Liebersberger, it's Livelsberger.
Liebersberger. I thought it was Liebersberger, but Life is Burger is like very American and
Life is Burger.
So yeah, but so like I think that it's also like it's not necessarily that someone sees an attack and then goes like, oh, I should do something like that, but it's that like all these people doing these things are affected by the same underlying kind of, you know, the things. So they're kind of like downstream of a lot of the, you know, the factors. But so a pretty wild one. They got into his ChatGPT account and he was like literally asking ChatGPT what, you know, like where's a good place to like blow up a car, you know, like what kind of ammo is the fastest to shoot out of a gun, you know, like all this kind of stuff, like trying to I guess like
you were talking earlier about like conspiracy brain about this stuff, like what could you believe could be like someone faking something. I like, okay, when I saw the ChatGPT thing, I was like, okay, hang on a second, what if I'm saying what if here to the audience, right? I'm not saying this is the this is the thought that crossed my mind. I'm not even endorsing it. It's just an intrusive thought. It's a Tesla, right? And what if Elon Musk like planned a little like false flag thing outside of Trump Tower because he's trying to like do some he thinks he's Machiavellian, but like he's Elon Musk. Like remember through all of this, he is the dumbest guy in the world who thinks he's the smartest guy in the world.
He thinks he's pulling 4D chess, but it's 2D chess.
Exactly. It's like 1D. It's Connect 4, and he's like, and he's not winning at it. And he autopilot. He like, you know, pilot controls a Tesla Cybertruck and whatever. And that was the thought that popped into my head because I read the ChatGPT thing and I was like, if it was Elon Musk doing a fake flag thing, a false flag, he would think that someone would ask ChatGPT how to do a terrorist attack. He's like, let me just put myself in the shoes of the common man. How to do terrorist attack. Thank you, ChatGPT.
He's asking Grok.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there are all the elements there for like a very engaging conspiracy theory, right? And it's like some of the, you know, like there's so many of these things happening all the time now where it's like, man, I can't even blame people for believing conspiracy theories because sometimes the truth is actually stranger than fiction. You know, like you get like there's so many things that are getting actually, you know, like declassified and all this kind of stuff. And you're just like, oh, well, like, you know, like this shit that the CIA was doing, or like, you know, like what, like even how this guy was like talking about like, you know, in Afghanistan with like the opium trade and all that kind of stuff like that. Like this is wilder when you think about it. So, I mean, like personally, I feel like he was probably just a bro, you know, like he's just like, he just wanted to feel like Batman or Halo for a couple seconds, you know, but I feel like I just can't blame, like with this shit that happens in America, I just can't blame anyone for being like, yeah, maybe there's more to this. But yeah. Anyway, speaking of what Musk would do if he was up to some conspiratorial bullshit, what has Elon Musk been doing over in Europe? Soph, what's been going on over there?
All right, I'll tell you all about it. This is like, I mean, after just doing a story, like the last story I read was about like the fucking senior advisor on AI starting a big discourse war in MAGA, like a posting war, like, and it's just like layers of nonsense. Like I really am conscious of like Trump's coming in again. I don't want the Red Planet News to get like bogged down with like their kind of distracting nonsense. Like they're Trump's very good at generating bullshit, right? Like the Greenland and Canada thing has been all over the news, right? And it's just gibberish. And it's like, no, they're not going to invade Canada. They're not going to invade Greenland. But like, can we glean anything from that on its own? No, but I think it's worth like thinking a little bit about what Musk has been doing over the like holiday period with relation to far right parties in Europe. to see what we can kind of see about American imperialism and the kind of moves that it's playing. Because like there's something useful here to look at the ultimate enemy, which is American imperialism. Okay. Divorced emerald mine inheritor and personal friend of Ghislaine Maxwell, Elon Musk, used his winter break to come out in public support of multiple European far-right political parties. So, on 28th of December, Musk published an article in a German outlet announcing his support for the far-right party AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, known to have ties to neo-Nazi groups and responsible for countless acts of racist violence and a general wave of far-right anti-immigrant sentiment in Germany in recent years. There was a lot of reporting on this. I was like, when we were on the break for a few weeks, and I was like, what's the cold open going to be for Red Planet? I was thinking for a little while about like all of these liberal publications are like are running this like it's a story. Elon Musk is a Nazi. Like he's a white South African. I like what I'm sorry, like what do you like is this okay?
What do you expect?
Like literally. On the 5th of January, Musk expressed support for the Reform Party in the UK, a far-right party led by Nigel Farage, Mr. Brexit. Though he was also publicly critical of Farage for, in his view, not sufficiently supporting jailed far-right activist and founder of the Football Lads Alliance, Tommy Robinson. This week, Musk also hosted a live stream interview with AfD's leader, Alice Weidel. So, okay, what's going on here? Is Elon becoming Cecus Maximus? Yes, of course, that is the rebrand he's doing. But at the same time, there's something like that has to do with like the material machinations here that we should look at. So these parties specifically are parties that are like not just like far right and racist, but also very pointedly against the like European political bloc, the European political project, the EU, but also like the single market, but also like immigration through Europe, just everything that makes Europe a stronger power in the world in and of itself. Now, obviously, like Europe itself is evil. Like European imperialism is like the hundreds of years of evil before American imperialism. We're not fighting for European domination of the world. We're fighting for the liberation of everyone around the world. All power to all people. But weakening European power, right, would make of the imperial core countries, America just like unequivocally and unquestionably the most powerful bloc in the whole world, and there would be no question over whether like Europe could succeed it within the imperial core. So in my view, that's what this is about. Like that's what this kind of thing is about. Like we've had a lot of stories of like the Silicon Valley tech bro crowd and how they've been like reacting to Trump. Like Trump's inauguration. I've forgotten the official like the proper term, but it's like an inauguration fund. It's like people can donate to the campaign. And then like once someone is president-elect, people can donate again in the same way to kind of express that they like are lobbying for like special like consideration by the president-elect. And like the first time around, Trump was passed over by practically all of big business because they were just like, what the fuck is this nonsense? And like a bunch of I think casinos supported him, right? In his inaugural fund. This time around, like it's been reported that a lot of Silicon Valley tech bros and like tech mega corporations have like put in quite significant amounts of money to support Trump this time. And the news of the big social media stink the last couple of days is like Mark Zuckerberg has come back with like podcast boy haircut and chain, and like is saying that like companies need to be more masculine. And it's it's embarrassing, but it's also like
like
they see where the profit is. Like that's what they're doing, right? Like it's
Rogan just like launders these guys. Like it's just like like that's his job now. He just takes like the shittiest tech bros and he just like launders their reputation to just be like, no, they're just a boy's boy. They're just a bro. It's like it's fucking wild. It's so like so transparent as well. Like it's almost like he's getting some kind of like funding money from petrochemical billionaires, like, or a libertarian think tank perhaps. Something like that.
Seem like that. Yeah.
Today I'm throwing the pigskin around with the ghost of Milton Friedman. So So yeah, tech bros have been like supporting Trump a lot more this time around, and I think it's like one part of it has to be acknowledged as kind of an ideological alignment of just like, well, the incel revolution, like it's them trying to make the incel revolution happen, but like it's gonna go the same way as with South Korea as far as that like ideological project just has no fucking legs. But in terms of American imperialism, it needs to be understood that like a big kind of revanchist surge is like in all of these people's favor. Like all of the kind of attempts to just like really dig in like American dominance like will not benefit Trump's base, right? Like the MAGA split is significant because like the working class racists who voted for Trump because they think he's like them and like thinks the same things they do, like are not going to benefit from any of this shit whatsoever. Of course not. But like this kind of like, yeah, as I say, digging in, like it enables the ruling class to at least kid themselves that like they could create a survival bubble from climate apocalypse, right? Like that they could like accrue enough wealth that they will not like get acid rained on just like everybody else. Like that's the belief they really have, and they think that if they can just like make America do maximum violence, go like full Immortan Joe on everyone, then like they will have their like personal little green paradise. And yeah, like of course not. But I just think like Musk like talking about Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is particularly like a figure in the British far right, like associated with like free speech. Sorry, Tommy Robinson is associated with like free speech because like it's like this is like the talking points around he's just like says too outrageous stuff, and that's why they had to lock him up because he's challenging to power or whatever. It's like at the same time as this, like Meta has dropped a bunch of moderation to do with LGBT people, and like this alignment, like European parliaments. Another factor, sorry, to go back, like another factor in the opposition to like the European project is like the European project altogether is very like liberal progressive one. A lot of European parliaments and the EU itself have been like very interested in constraining tech corporations like directly, like not just in their like their content moderation is a concern that like fits into the culture war neatly, but like they've been trying to make sure that they're not doing things that are just like ruining people's lives so that they can glean like 1 more cent off the dollar out of like monetizing every waking second you have. Like this is like stuff that the European Parliament has been trying to oppose, and obviously Zuckerberg has a material interest in like pushing straight past that. So I feel like there's an aesthetic alignment through the stuff to do with like free speech, content moderation, masculine energies, going on Joe Rogan, all of this shit. And it's the same kind of aesthetic ideological alignment as you have between Trump and like the AfD and the Reform Party. But like the material alignment is a material alignment with American imperialism and like the maximum freedom for the ruling class to just like suck value out of everyone else's lives. So that's everything I wanted to say about that.
One funny thing to come out of this was because obviously Elon Musk doing things about it, talking about it on Twitter is just going to make all the worst people decide to throw in their 2 cents about this. One of the more funny things was when I saw that Andrew Tate said that he was going to run for Prime Minister of the UK, which is not. Because
he knows exactly how that works. Right?
It's not a thing you can do. And then like later on, like when obviously like people had corrected him and said like, yeah, you can't do that, bro. Like you have to have like a political party. He like announced this party, and it's called something like the Bloke Party.
It's the Bruv Party. It's like
the Bruv Party.
UV, yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, man. I just love this like enshittification of everything. It's so good.
He said something as well about bringing the UK back to like Christian values, but then it's like last time I saw he was like talking about how he was like Muslim and like it's just like, man, like the guy will just say anything.
Just say anything. Literally just keep saying words and something will work for him. Yeah.
I don't know. All I'm saying about the tech bro stuff is we just need to recognize it materially for what it is, which is like trying to enhance American imperialism and Meanwhile, everything in the Imperial Core is turning to shit and everything's AI and it's on fire. And my third story this week will be about things being literally on fire in the Imperial Core. But for now, Mule, can you tell us about these Serbian student protests?
Yeah, it's always exciting when students do protests. Literally the breeding ground, the proving ground of revolutions. So pleased to bring you this story. On the 1st of November 2024, last year, a train station ceiling collapse in Novi Sad in northern Serbia killed 15 people, including a six-year-old girl. The incident sparked public outcry as it served as a focal point for popular frustrations with Serbia's current government. AP News reports the train station has been renovated twice in recent years, and critics of the authoritarian president attributed the disaster to corruption and sloppy renovations on the part of his administration. Members of the opposition plan to protest in front of the station the following Saturday. This week, student-led protests in Serbia grew thousands strong and blocked a motorway section in Belgrade, the capital. Again, some more from AP News here, chanting, "We want justice," quoted there. The crowd first gathered outside the central courthouse in Belgrade to urge punishment for who they described as pro-government thugs who have attacked protesters at an earlier gathering. Protesters have staged almost daily street demonstrations to demand accountability over the November the 1st crash at a railway station building in northern city of Novi Sad. 14 people were killed and 3 others were severely injured after tons of concrete crashed without warning, and one more person died while in hospital. That's the end of the Associated Press News, AP News segment there. The students have shut down their universities with classes suspended for multiple weeks as they demand an end to the corruption and ineptitude of the current government. One protester commented on a post discussing the situation on Instagram, quote, "We protest because decades-long corruption killed 15 citizens when the roof of the renovated and twice reopened railway station, which renovation costed more than €65 million, collapsed on the 1st of November 2024. Since then, we are protesting non-stop and blocking our faculties." I mean, this is just, it's another situation in a long string of these are the what do you call it? This is what happens when you reap the sowing of austerity. Like, austerity is, fundamentally something that drives neoliberalism in the imperial core, and it's at the focus of all governments who are trying to just basically be as fascist as possible without leaning fully into the goose step, as it were. And you could just see more and more of this. Like, this echoes what happened in the UK earlier last year when loads of schools had to close because the Tories had renovated a bunch of schools with shit concrete, or they removed. I don't think it's that they renovated the schools with shit concrete. I think it's that they removed the fund to repair them or whatever, and then so a load of schools just had to close because otherwise people would just die. And it's just the only thing that's going to happen. It's just going to repeatedly keep happening. It's like we've got the enshittification of politics, like we just spoke about in the last story, and then we've got the enshittification of infrastructure, which comes from austerity politics. There's just so much of that,
and we're seeing that a lot now, with even fires in fucking LA and stuff, where it's these fires are a problem because of climate change, but there's also it's so much worse because of the fucking enshittification of all their public services, including their fire departments, their the literal infrastructure, like the fire hydrants, all that kind of stuff. Even just the way that they have just destroyed the land, and even the forest services and all that kind of stuff. And it's the fires would still happen, but they would not happen on this scale if it hadn't have been for fucking decades of enshittification. So
and then you get the shit on top of that. Specifically talking about the wildfires, the insurance companies refusing to pay out. I mean, obviously we'll get into that in a minute. Sophie's going to talk about it in a minute, but it's exactly that same thing. It's the entire system is just this circle jerk of complete bullshit, made up stuff. lies to make you buy insurance that doesn't work, that isn't going to cover, the actual things that you need it for. And, ultimately you're just paying this sort of like racketeering subscription fee for like, some fear of a thing that's going to happen, where like the actual thing that happens that you need it for, it's just simply uninsurable. Who's doing fucking climate change insurance? Literally nobody. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing from Serbia. We're going to keep you updated on that. Obviously, it's a really big thing. When you have thousands of protesters, doing it every week, and doing stuff in universities nonstop. That's really important stuff. But Tim, speaking of ongoing protests, give us the update on the genocide in Palestine.
Yeah, it's so impossible to even keep up because things are happening every day. So I'm gonna do the best I can to recap just the last couple of weeks, I think, since we had the last stream. But yeah, I wanted to start off with this one though. The deaths from the Israeli attacks in Gaza undercounted by 41%, a study found. The Lancet put out a peer-reviewed study that suggests that the official death toll of Palestinians from Israel's genocide in Gaza could be undercounted by about 41%. So because of a lot of not like there's always been kind of a little bit of controversy on the official death toll, right? Like at first they were like Israel was like, don't trust the Hamas run fucking ministry that are reporting on this kind of stuff, even though the Hamas run health ministry, which is literally just the health ministry of Gaza, have a great track record for reporting accurately, and they've had to be, they've had to be because Israel fucking just crucifies them over any kind of little thing. So then it became, well, they just destroyed all of the people that were making records, and then as hospitals and schools and everything were gone, it became harder to actually track. And then you get to the point where it's like, so there's the deaths of, so Israel says that they only count the deaths of people that were killed fighting, they say that's like the real death toll, whatever. But then they also claim that every non-combatant killed is a fucking terrorist as well. Yep. So they're all over the place with that. But so this study also includes people that died as a result of the infrastructure deteriorating because of its obviously with like the hospitals and things gone, the water being contaminated, all these kind of things. They obviously have a flow-on effect of people dying, like even people that die because they have existing medical conditions, but they couldn't be treated for them, or they couldn't get medication. All these kind of things are all an effect of, what is happening there. So while, thousands and thousands of people have been killed directly by the bombs and the bullets and stuff, there's also these like a more holistic view of things where we say like, okay, well, there's like people that have starved, people that have been sick, people, all these other things as well, who are all, just as valid victims of the genocide. So so this is the first time that someone has really put together like a really formal kind of study that has been able to look at these numbers. But yeah, so it's pretty damning. The figure that they got goes from October 7th up to June the 30th last year. So it's still months out of date. But at that point, they were thinking between 55,000 to 78,000, with just under 60% of that number being children and other non-combatants, like like elderly people and like women that weren't like fighters or anything like that.
So like I think that the thing that we have to stress here is that the Lancet here is saying that the Gazan health ministry had undercounted the deaths, not necessarily Israel. But also another thing to remember is that the Lancet had also said that the death toll in Gaza is more likely actually to be around 100,000 or maybe even in the hundreds of thousands, based on the fact that because what you have to remember is that, like, you know, Gaza's health ministry was being bombed to shit and people were dying. Like, you know, there's literally a genocide happening there, and, you know, didn't have the manpower, the resources or anything to like accurately record this information. And also not to be able, like, they're obviously also completely unable to, you know, sort of accurately judge and assess just how many people are lost among rubble, and, you know, whether those people are dead, whether it's likely that they're dead, you know, and this kind of a thing. So yeah, it's really important to remember that, like, you know, all of this reporting is just going to be so inaccurate when the dust settles, you know, and people can really gain like a bit of you know, clarity on this.
And there's it's wild because, so, you know, like, while the official number or whatever has like from Israel has like hovered around the same thing for a while, we're still seeing every couple of days we're seeing like, oh yeah, here's another couple hundred people that have been killed by Israel every day, you know. And it's just like that number is, you know, like, it's like, there's no way, like, I mean, it's got to be so much higher just based on that. But also there's you know, there's just like stuff where there's a lot of misinformation out there. Like, a lot of people always bring up the population growth of Gaza. They're like, you know, if it's a genocide, why is the population growing? And they always bring up the same graph, the same study or whatever. And it's like, I
hate that line so much.
It's and it's like literally a projection based on figures prior to October 7th. So before all that kind of come out, they're like, oh, if the population keeps growing at the same rate, this is what it's projected to be. So it's not actually, you know, and like I don't even
just
know how
reporting any, I mean, you've already talked about this, but like just reporting any accurate figures about what's happening is so hard. Except
there's no
like the lowest possible estimate. Yeah, because there's no like, it's just like, how many people are currently unaccounted for? Well, you have to have had accurate data even before that began, and like, it's been an occupation. These people have been in like the world's largest open air prison for all this time. So it's like, it's just
So I'm sure that, like, I mean, even this number that that the Lancet has reported is still from June last year. So even then, is still, you know, like, it's got to be a lot higher than that. But so, and moving on from that, there was just recently there's been a new string of settler violence in occupied West Bank. And this is like the other thing, right? Like, at first they were just like, oh, it's just Gaza, we just need to sort out Gaza. But this entire time there has been this violence in the West Bank. And just super recently, there's also been escalation in military raids there, and like a lot of Palestinian farms in the West Bank are just getting burned down because they know that, you know, they don't have the resources to rebuild them. So this is all comes after a call by the Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar, who was urging Netanyahu to authorize a large-scale offensive in the West Bank to dismantle Palestinian armed resistance. But it's really like, they just want to get everyone out of there. They just want to destroy. They want to destroy all the farms. They want to destroy all the houses. It's armed. When they say to dismantle Palestinian armed resistance, they know that the Palestinians will, you know, like, as long as they live, they will resist. And so that's what it means. It means they want to remove every Palestinian person from that space. And over in the US, we've got, so the US House has voted to advance a bill to sanction the ICC over Israel arrest warrants. So the ICC has put out the warrants for for Netanyahu and some others. I think it's Yoav Gallant, some others, and So the United States House of Representatives has passed an illegitimate court counteraction act. So they're saying that the ICC is this illegitimate court, which is funny because it's only illegitimate when it doesn't, when it's not on their side.
Right. So, it's the Hague invasion. I can't remember what it's called, but like the official act America passed that if like any American has ever tried in the Hague, they will invade the Hague. But
Yeah. So they're proposing sanctions against anyone that aids the ICC's investigations into leaders of non-member states like Israel and the US following the court's issuance of arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. So critics, including human rights groups, warn that the bill undermines the ICC's role in seeking justice for war crimes and aligns the US with impunity over accountability. So the legislation, which echoes prior Trump-era policies, now heads to the Senate, where swift passage is expected, which really underscores the bipartisan support for Israel, despite it all. Like the Democrats and Republicans are both fucking so far up Israel's ass on this shit that they just they're expecting that it's just going to fly through, which is pretty horrific. It's like there's just this wild thing of like, the international rules-based order is just like a complete farce at this point. And similarly, Poland has said that it will protect Benjamin Netanyahu from potential arrest if he comes to so they're doing the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and so despite the arrest warrants and Poland being, party to the ICC, they've said that if he or other Israeli figures listed on the warrants go to Poland, that they won't act on those arrest warrants. And it's kind of just like, then what's the point, right? Like, even like I see, like I can see how people be like, oh well, like obviously like what happened in the Holocaust is really like tragic, and that people should be able to kind of pay their respects as they are like descendants of the victims and all this kind of stuff. But also like there is an active genocide that is going on. Like if you want to pay respect to the victims of the Holocaust, you should really be looking at like the current Holocaust that is happening right now. So another fucking black mark for the international rules-based order. And so another one recently, Israel has admitted now to hiding soldiers in an ambulance to perform raids in the West Bank. So the IDF has admitted to doing it to infiltrate the Balata refugee camp in the West Bank. So again, this is not in Gaza, this is in the West Bank, in a refugee camp, killing 2 Palestinians, including an 80-year-old woman. So in what the UN expert Francesca Albanese has called a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. Such actions, including the misuse of protected entities like medical vehicles, constitute perfidy under the Geneva Conventions and have been repeatedly employed by Israeli forces in previous operations, such as disguising soldiers as civilians or aid workers. Since October 7th, intensified Israeli military campaigns in the West Bank have resulted in the deaths of at least 815 Palestinians, further exacerbating the ongoing humanitarian crisis there in the West Bank. So this is, once again, this is in the West Bank. This is not in Gaza. This is in the area where they, like this is where Israel says like, oh, this is fine. We live in peace here. But still, still doing these horrific war crimes. And just to wrap it up for this part, the Archbishop Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, who led Mass in Gaza, shared a message of hope as he prepared to preside over midnight Mass in Bethlehem. I just arrived yesterday from Gaza. I saw everything destroyed, poverty, disaster, he said. But I also saw life. They don't give up, so you should not give up either, never. Pizzaballa added in a speech outside the Bethlehem Peace Center, a cultural venue, that we are stronger. We belong to light, not to darkness, he said, standing beside a Palestinian flag. Next year, we want to see the biggest Christmas tree ever. So it's like, it's so wild to me that this is literally, so in Jerusalem, like they had mass there in the Church of the Nativity, which is like literally at the site of where they believe Jesus was born. And they're, and they this year, so they didn't have a Christmas tree or anything like that because they thought that would be inappropriate. They had a humble little mass there while like these insane American Christian Zionists are just like begging for these people to be wiped off the map. Like, it's just like, it's so deranged. So yeah, like, I don't know. I don't see how anyone could consider themselves a Christian and be, and not see something like this and see people like this in these circumstances, and just not go, and not like, and like, and so you see like this kind of stuff, and then you look at people like Aaron Bushnell, and you just think like, like, I get it, right? It's
it's
wild,
1000%.
So hopefully the time Christmas rolls around next year, we will get the biggest Christmas tree ever in Jerusalem.
The biggest Christmas tree, and it's called The Destruction of Zionism, American Imperialism, and Infinite Vengeance upon Benjamin Netanyahu and everyone who supports him. Fuck.
It's wild. But why don't Soph, why don't you wrap us up for the news, and we can talk about the Palisade fires a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So this everyone already knows the story I'm going into here. It's partly like, I've got this at the end of the news to segue us into the topic of discussion for today. So I feel like it'll start to probably bleed into that a little bit already. But there's been massive wildfires in the LA area this week. At one point I saw the fire was like consuming the area of like multiple football pitches in like a minute. Like, it just tens of thousands of people displaced and tens of thousands of homes now being destroyed. I saw someone talking about like it was actually a renters union, Conrad and friend, shared something I saw, like talking about how like a ton of rent controlled homes being destroyed, and obviously like nothing new being built is allowed to be rent controlled. So it's just like a massive destruction of people's homes and lives in a way that's honestly like hard to grasp. Like it's if like all of the future construction of our literal built environment like can't belong to people, or even have just like rent control, like this kind of destruction, I don't know, like we've been seeing so much destruction in Gaza like for over a year now, but to see like climate change wreaking like destruction on this kind of scale, like the kind of scale that like we usually only see with wars, genocides, invasions, like so I think it's worth highlighting what is just straight to the most important thing about this story, which I think is like, this is like a new kind of fire. Like, this is a new kind of fire that's burning the planet. This is like not something we've seen before. It is like bigger than what we've seen before. I'm going to read for a little bit from a CNN article titled "No Water System in the World." No quotes, water system in the world could have handled the LA fires. How the region could have minimized the damage. So Los Angeles city and council officials have characterized the fires as a perfect storm event in which a hurricane force gusts up to 100 miles per hour prevented them from deploying crucial aircraft that could have dropped water and fire retardant on the drought-ravaged neighborhoods early on. The consensus of experts interviewed by CNN was that the combination of those winds, unseasonably dry conditions, and multiple fires breaking out one after another in the same geographic region made widespread destruction inevitable. So this is something that's covered quite extensively in David Wallace Wells's book. I nearly said David Foster Wallace. David Wallace Wells's book, The Uninhabitable Earth, is the way that like climate change is this like cascading like crises, and it's not just like, this is an example that can drive home for us like it's a microcosm, like it's a smaller example that can drive home for us more abstract things. The winds and the fire combined here are both like climate change driven kinds of disasters. The fact that they're happening together is itself like a climate change driven type of change to our climate. Like, sorry, well, of course it is, it's change to our climate, but like global warming, man-made climate change, like is driving this kind of overlapping of crises, and we will see this more and more. But like in that same way, we will see like rising sea levels alongside massively overpolluted air in the same regions, but we'll also see like civil wars that are no doubt stoked by people having like resource shortages in a region that causes a power vacuum, coinciding with those same resource shortages, like intensifying droughts and floods and wildfires, like these kinds of things. Like it affects the political as well as like the physical, ecological. Anyway, so I'm going to read a bit more from the article this time about the infrastructure, because like the infrastructure being unprepared for what is now unfolding in front of us is a crucial part of what we have to understand is happening here. So part of the investigation is certain to focus on a key ingredient in fighting fires: water. As high winds stoked flames Wednesday morning, firefighters could be heard on radio broadcasts relaying an alarming development. Quote, "We've lost most of the hydrant pressure," one firefighter said around 2:45 a.m. as he requested help refilling fire engines, according to a county dispatch recording. "Got dry hydrants," said another. Experts told CNN that even fully functioning hydrants would not have been enough to battle fires of the magnitude of those that raged this week, particularly when air resources such as helicopters and fixed-wing aircrafts were grounded due to the wind. I don't know a water system in the world that is prepared for this type of event," said Greg Pierce, a water resource expert at UCLA. So there is the fact that like, as Pierce said, like no water system in the world could have handled this type of fire. And then at the same time, there is like the infrastructure that LA does have. So misinformation is so funny now, right? With social media, we have like that thing about like a lie can make it halfway around the world while the truth is still tying its shoelaces, right? Like we have these like ripples of like misinformation go around the world so fast. So like I think Trump talked a little bit about the dry hydrants after this stuff was going around. So then you have a bunch of people who are like spreading Trumpian misinformation about something to do with the crisis that's unfolding. And then you have a bunch of liberal reactions saying that's Trump misinformation, therefore everything involved in it is misinformation, so there weren't dry hydrants. And then a bunch of liberals are starting to say like a different kind of misinformation that's like defending the infrastructure that existed as if it were perfect, creating like another unreality. It's just fascinating to see. Anyway, the hydrants in LA are fed off of 3 individual million-gallon tanks, and they ran dry like one after another because it was just such a large fire. There are various reasons for a system of that type, like rather than it being connected to mains water. But like the fact that there have been increasingly large wildfires in California and all over America, like year on year, and this infrastructure was not improved, is like points to something that is really a problem here, which is that like the ruling class is funding police more and not funding disaster like preparedness and crisis relief more. Like, or just in really simple terms, like funding more pigs and not more firefighters in a world that's on fire, completely insane. I don't know. You two, your thoughts on the Palisade fires? I don't want to dive too quickly into like the discussion of today, which is going to be climate technologies, but it's all going to we're definitely going to find ourselves rehashing a lot of the like founding ideas of Red Planet and how crisis is going to deliver us to massive political change in this episode. Thoughts specifically on the Palisade fires from either of you?
Tim?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, right? Like, it's like obviously climate change. I mean, we were talking about this earlier about like the enshittification of all the public services and all that kind of stuff made it so much worse, where it's like these fires would normally happen, but to this level, obviously the combination of the climate getting worse, the fucking enshittification of all the public services, the fucking fire department, all that kind of shit, just not having, like, and I mean, there's like that also, that whole thing about like that whole area is an area of like there's even like everyone has always known that the Palisades are fire hills, like, but they built that, like they zoned it for residential. They built houses there because of the incentive to, like obviously like build suburbs and, like subdivisions and all these kind of things like that. Like, because there was a dollar value that, like there was an investment to be made. There was money to be made here and all this kind of stuff. And like the thing that reading about this reminded me of when we had the really bad floods here, where there have been entire subdivisions, entire houses, like all these like housing plots built on land that was previously defined as floodplains. So it's kind of like, this is the same thing where it's like there has always been like, there's a historic understanding of this is a place that we shouldn't build, but then like the drive to create more houses, well, to sell more houses leads people to buying land in cheaper areas and flipping it into these big subdivisions or whatever like that. And so like I've seen people talk online being like, this has got nothing to do with capitalism, what are you talking about? And it's like, no, because like it's like climate change and capitalism are obviously intrinsically linked, right? But also like just even like outside of the actual effects to the planet by by capitalism and stuff, there's also just like the drive to put houses in places where we shouldn't have put houses and all this kind of stuff. And even like if you go further back than that, so much of LA and California in general has been like basically terraformed by I guess like by settler development, like areas that looked completely different before Europeans arrived there, and they resettled areas, and they changed the flow of rivers, and they did all these kind of things, and which is something that we get a lot down here as well. And obviously, I mean, like anywhere where there is like like that kind of settler relationship with the land, and so it's like it's of course it has something to do with capitalism in the way that everything has to do with capitalism when we're living in like a capitalist country and in what is basically a capitalist world. Like the global hegemony is capitalist, whatever. But yeah, like I think that a lot of people are just kind of reducing it to like, they just think of like the climate as being like like they're like, the fires are because of climate change, because things are getting hotter because of like pollution and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and
we just have to recycle more. You just have
exactly.
You just have to wear shoes made of bin bags whenever.
Yeah, you got to look at this bigger picture, and then there's a bigger picture to the bigger picture. And it's like, like this kind of thing where it's like, yeah, like the enshittification is a part, the fucking the commodification of the land is a huge part. There's so much going on here, and even like there's like some people that are like, it's got nothing to do with capitalism. It's got to do with like fentanyl tweakers starting fires and all this kind of shit. And it's like, okay, even if I had no brain, even if I had a small rock just pinging around in my skull, I go like, damn, that's crazy. Like, so what's the deal with fentanyl? Where'd that come from? Why are people hooked on that? Like, yeah. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Like it's just, I don't know, like. So I think it's like at the moment, anytime someone brings it up, like anytime, and this is like, like has happened at work where people will bring it up and they'll have some angle, they'll be like, it's because of this. And it's like, it's always just like one step away of being like, well, this is actually, like even if you believe that, this is the truth behind
it.
This is the explanation.
My point for years has been that like capitalism is causing climate change. This is scientific fact. We don't need to, that's not my point. Climate change is going to make capitalism impossible, right? And like even like just bringing together a couple of news stories we have today, like we've been talking a bunch so far about like acts of violence, like sporadic, stochastic, whatever acts of violence that are from people whose ideologies are a complete mess, but in their real personal life, they've faced like utter horror at the hands of a system, deciding that the way to deal with that is to like just take it out on the clearest target of that, like the head of that system as best they can see it. And like there are just going to be more and more people whose lives have been destroyed by climate change and like are in constant suffering because of climate change. I'm sorry, like that's just it's happening. Like it's gonna that's the thing we'll see. 2026. I'll just say that. Like that's my guess.
Yeah, honestly. I think 2026 is an accurate prediction, to be honest, because it is kind of like one of those things now where we're seeing it scale up so much and affect so many different types of people. Like it wasn't just the wildfires. Obviously, this is the first thing this year, but last year there were so many climate disasters happening in the United States. It's one of those situations where it's like when you do imperialism, you can control where the imperialism happens and how it affects you. In your country to a degree, right? If you have like the right amount of control over the populace, which is what we see, like generally speaking, with the USA, like the vast majority of like USA wars have not been fought on USA land or in the nation within the states themselves. But when you are doing the thing that you're doing the imperialism for, which is this like mass production of stuff that requires like endless infinite energy and endless infinite profits and endless exploitation, like you actually can't control where the results of that happen, and therefore that's now why it's like, well, the chickens are coming home to roost, essentially. It's like, well, you're having this shit happen just like directly in the imperial core. It's not just in the US as well, like even though it's not been nearly as lethal. In the UK, there's been like a bunch of floods as well, and there's going to be loads more floods, and there's just going to continue to be floods in these like various different imperial core countries. And it's kind of one of those situations that sort of makes me think, well, obviously, we do think about the climate, different the political axis that we spoke about. I forgot what it's called.
Yeah,
it's the
we're going to get to it. Climate Leviathan. We're going to do that in the discussion.
And basically, that is essentially like we're at this point where it's like, would refugees from imperial periphery countries even want to come to imperial countries now? If these imperial core countries are getting ravaged by climate change as well, like where is the safe place going to be on the earth? Like where is actually like the refuge? Where is the sanctuary going to be? But again, we'll probably get into that as the discussion.
And Tim, unless you have more, should we say the news is wrapped up?
I think that's a good segue into our actual discussion topic of the day, which is going to be climate technologies.
Before that, though, we should remind everyone that we are supported by the patrons over on patreon.com/rad_planet. We're aware it is an increasingly tough time for everyone. I mean, that's kind of the premise of our show, is that we're aware of that. And everyone is struggling and stuff is shit. We also need your support to be able to keep making the show, for the show to carry on existing. We need more people to subscribe to the Patreon. With stuff being tough, like we've seen, like some of our like big patrons have downgraded, and like we've lost patronage, and like we have a I think we make a show that is not like anything else anyone is making. I'm really proud of the show that we make, and I want to keep making it, and I'm sure that we will. But it's made more possible, and we're able to do more stuff that we otherwise wouldn't be able to because of our Patreon support. We'll talk a little bit more at the end about like about the bonus content and the upcoming documentary project that we're working on. We have a trip to France, Mule and I are going on this year to finish that documentary. But yeah, just remind everyone, patreon.com/red_planet is how the show is made possible. So please check it out.
And you should also go to Pal Action Prisoners, the section of their website about prisoners, Palestine Action, friends of the show. We've had multiple Palestine Action actionists on our show in the past, and there are currently a lot of them in prison, and it would be cool if you could send them a letter via the emails that are on that site. But Sophie, why don't you intro us into the discussion episode?
Well, absolutely. So where do we begin? Today we're going to be talking about climate technologies. I'd like us to explore some of the main suggested methods by which we can put right what is wrong in the Earth's ecology. And just a spoiler that we'll also be exploring why capitalism can't deliver these technologies or won't, or why some of them are just a fiction for capitalists, and why only massive social change, i.e. socialism, can really rescue us from climate apocalypse. Where to begin? Right, Mule, you already mentioned the book. What's the book called?
That's what I was going to ask you. Climate Revolution, Climate
Leviathan.
Climate Leviathan.
It's Climate Leviathan by Jeff Mann and Joel Wainwright. And this book is a really good one to read. If you had already read the book I mentioned earlier, which is David Wallace Wells's Uninhabitable Earth, it would be a fantastic follow-up for you to get out of that slump of learning just how bad climate change is going to be for the planet by reading Climate Leviathan, and instead looking at what are the practical ways we think about the politics of the future and how things will change and what we can expect. The premise of the book is that in a similar way to Leviathan, penned by Thomas Hobbes, about the sovereignty of the English king, a totalizing sovereignty and an ability to enact one plan on the world is necessary in order for there to be a meaningful fighting of climate change. And whoever can claim that sovereignty claims a sort of whoever can claim legitimacy of that plan to be able to present a future claims sovereignty of the world in world politics going forward. So the first idea here is the notion of climate Leviathan, which is that completely totalizing idea. Like I just said, presenting the idea that we have some kind of plan for what the future looks like. This is why climate technologies become super relevant, right? Because the capitalist world order, if it's the rules-based order that is being so completely farcically debunked by Israel in real time, it has to claim that capitalist sovereignty as it has so far existed, the American imperialist project, the whole imperial core, of course, American imperialism, European imperialism, that this all together has some way of changing things and not just killing everyone, the entire world. And that means that they need to have viable technological solutions, or else they have splinter factions coming off of this order that are proposing that they have a plan that is to, as I said before, just build a little bubble, and for things to be good inside that little bubble for as long as it can last. This in the book is called Climate Behemoth. Behemoth is another biblical beast like Leviathan, but is not as large. Pardon me. So the idea here is that the simplest possible way you could just envisage this is Immortan Joe. If you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, it is just a death cult of people burning as much oil as they can to make their life personally good at the expense of everyone they're massively exploiting. There's a massive in that film there's a massive slave class upholding the what are they called? Is it the motor boys or something?
The war boys?
Yeah.
Exactly. The war boys are just
fuck, I love those movies. Just putting it out there. Love that shit.
Yeah, it fucking goes so hard.
They're incredible films. Honestly, strong Red Planet endorsement of Mad Max just as a whole series, especially Mad Max Fury Road, but just an incredible Anyway, not the point, not the topic of discussion for today. Maybe we'll do a Discord hang and watch some Mad Max sometime.
Oh,
that would rule.
Oh,
that would be so good.
That'd be so good.
So, but taking back from like the like wacky, fetish gear clad world of Mad Max to like, sort of real world politics, like the analogy that people like satirists like to make between Trump and Immortan Joe is so fitting, and it feels so right because it's like he is like in our terms doing the exact same thing ideologically as Immortan Joe is. Like he is trying to push forward with a climate behemoth. And like when I was talking about Musk and his encouragement of European fascism, like, and how that is like encouraging far right parties who are opposed to the European, like to the EU, right? Like that's opposing an imperialist consensus. Like we've had this imperialist consensus until now, where all the big powers of the world have been like effectively in a pretty well working collaboration since World War II. Like World War II is last time there's a serious fracture in like what the imperialist powers like really wanted and were really trying to do as one project. We talk about American imperialism, but like American imperialism is this conglomerate imperialism of lots of different nations that all had empires. Before a certain point, it all came to a head. The inevitable like dick measuring contest of empires came to a head, and they became one, as I say, conglomerate empire. And like there's a sort of, I don't know, trade-off to different countries have formed like different roles in this. Like one of the reasons I think that Musk is targeting Britain and Germany specifically is that Britain is like the entire British economy exists to just like do the money laundering of the imperialist project effectively. Like it's a financial organ. That's what it exists for. Like, and Germany is so much seen as like the face of the EU. So like he's targeting that because it's like the crumbling of the EU. This all, as I say, like it's a climate behemoth project. Like it's splintering away from the consensus that existed before and like trying to make things just good for literally themselves. Like people who are making policy decisions, like the fact that the reason they can just lie like that, the reason that misinformation and racist bullshit surrounds like all these people's politics is because they're just trying to get just enough votes to be able to hold on to power, to do the kind of changes that make their lives better for their like specific, I mean, literally them and the people they know. Okay, that's enough ramble about Planet Behemoth. After this, in the book, Wainwright and Mann talk about Climate Mao, which is basically, I personally feel like they're using the figure of Chairman Mao as this like boogeyman, right? Like spooky Chinese boogeyman. Like, what if different foreign power, like we're obviously speaking to an Anglophone audience. I mean, in the book, I mean us too. We're speaking English, but like, unfortunately, but they. But what if like the world power, instead of being an English speaking world power, was Chinese? Oh no, what then? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, then I don't know. Like there may be a different culture that is not totally but it's not. They're human beings. What are you talking? Like and what they're trying to like actually talk about in this section is about a socialist like world sovereignty, like something being established that like creates a new like world order. I said new world order. I gave the game away. Oh shit!
No.
That is socialist in the way that America's world order is capitalist, right? So like, probably a hierarchy of different countries' powers, like probably in some sense still an imperialist like structure of power, but like socialism because of like the need for planned economies to deal with climate change, right? Like you ultimately like do just need to have planned economies if you're dealing with climate change at a state level. Now, as I say, I feel like they're using Mao as kind of a boogeyman figure here. I'm not saying I don't think Climate Mao would be that bad. You can imagine horrible shit happening with a bunch of like authoritarian regimes in any like imagining of the future that you want to do. But honestly, you could also imagine a nice future. Why don't you try that as well?
Yeah.
You're getting very imaginary already, right? Like we are currently living under like a global capitalist supremacy, and so if we're talking about a global socialist one, maybe it's hard to say what it would be like, right? It's just I don't know.
Yeah, I think like the most like if that were to be the way that things went, the most sort of realistic block of states to kind of do that would be BRICS right now, probably, which is the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, of which there are like
but more countries have been joining it. Like
more countries. Cuba
weekly,
has recently joined as well,
exactly.
Which is interesting. And it's and again, I think I was talking with you, Soph, about it, and you were saying that they're literally doing third worldism, like that's what BRICS is like, and that was like a Maoist like idea, right?
Yeah. I think like China, the real like the driving force here, and they're like the only people. Like China's the only state that I see realistically tackling climate change head on.
I mean,
like
both
in the past, maybe India,
in
but
the future,
I feel
but like both in the sense of seeing, like you could imagine that they could do it, but also like they're the only ones who've at the state level been doing like massive projects of like natural conservation and like green energy and
they have a record of taking it seriously since they knew it was a thing. Whereas like, in America and Europe, all these states are like going back and forth on whether they actually even are like going to acknowledge climate change and legislation or not, or like this, like these internal things like in America where it's like, oh, some states are allowed to acknowledge it and create policy around it. Whereas, but then like, like if you're in Florida, you're not actually even allowed to say in legislation that this is for climate change. You have to come up with some other bullshit, it's like just, I think like if we're talking about a world where it does happen, it's gonna be led by initiative like BRICS that I think will be largely driven by China. And I mean, like in my perspective, I would take like a problematic initiative that takes climate change seriously over like a problematic world that doesn't. We'll die.
It's called critical support, right? It's exactly. I mean, so I think it's worth mentioning in the idea that like China is the biggest player in this, like the likely biggest player in this possibility. It's worth mentioning for people who know nothing about Chinese political history, the broadest possible strokes of like the 20th century are Maoism and Dengism. Like these are just the two basic ideas you need. Maoism being like Maoist communism, the communist revolution in China, and like the establishment of a single communist power, like with all its various relations that it had to like communist powers in the region. And there was a Sino-Soviet split, like just a tragedy of modern history that like communist powers not working together. You're communist, what are you doing? But then Dengism was put forward by Deng Xiaoping, who was Mao's successor, essentially, who brought China into the global capitalist market. Now, he did this with a bunch of negotiation with Henry Kissinger. Mao also talked with Henry Kissinger. The guy knew how to sweet talk people, and so like it's very easy to see it as like wholly misguided. I personally do think Dengism is just cowardice. But like the explicit plan put forward is like is extending Mao's third worldist idea, like the idea of all the imperial periphery countries like unifying in power to be able to overturn the imperialist regime as it currently exists. Dengism is saying like accumulating power will be best done through engaging with global capitalism and then becoming a really powerful, essentially capitalist power. But Deng really wants to insist, as has remained the like communist Chinese Communist Party line, that like insist that what they are doing is still definitely actually communism, and then create this kind of again like global authority. Like this is like the reason, in short, China is such a viable, predictable leader in a climate Mao socialist world sovereignty is that it's the literal politics that they've been following like as their political plan for decades. And you can analyze like BRICS as being, like them trying to do that, build power in the specifically like prescribed Dengist way.
Yeah. So
we've actually talked about this before as well, and like aside from climate style and climate mal, we've kind of talked. I'm sure Soph have had this conversation with you about it. Maybe a climate Lenin.
Yeah. There's a really interesting article about climate Lenin. But one last thing I'll say on climate mal is just like it's a imaginative misstep people make a lot of the time, is to imagine, okay, so I'm now picturing a world where every country is socialist. And that's not what it means, because like that would be how the sovereignty would sell itself, because the sovereignty has to sell itself as totalizing, like in order to have legitimacy. In that same way, like American imperialism wants to bring every country into capitalism in one way or another. Like countries being outside of capitalist economics is like the worst possible thing they could be, right? Like communist, it's just a dirty word to American imperialists. And that would be the same thing would be true with a socialist sovereignty. There would be things that would be outside of it, but that would be like they would have to sell themselves as like unifying everything through their project. Okay, cool. We've got the basic axes. The fourth one, if anyone's wondering, is lovely hippy dippy world anarchism, where we all hold hands and just like
utopia,
just
baby.
And it's gonna happen. So like, why even think about anything else?
Yeah, exactly.
So
I've been having,
as I said,
a little look at these links that you've put in our document that we've got sort of the notes of the show of, and I'm having a look at these like energy use per person things.
Yeah.
This is great fun. It's a great bit of fun. In terms of like, when I say fun, it's like, oh yeah, all the things that I thought are true are definitely true. It's like, if you look at Africa, it's like, no one uses any fucking energy here whatsoever. And then you go to the USA and it's like 77,000 kilowatt hours per person. And it's like, what the fuck?
Yes, it just is the imperialist nations just doing the most damage. It's just very, very straightforward.
Yeah.
But the next thing we're going to talk about, as I said, is climate technologies. Because in order to have any kind of legitimate plan for the future, like whatever kind of sovereignty wants to assert itself has to have technologies to fight climate change with, right? So I have an article from before the election result, which was about like what will now. Well, it's still be relevant now. No, it's about what would like a Trump versus Harris victory mean for like climate and energy policy. And like just for the sake of time, to skip like to the gist of Harris's policies was going to like promise to try to like change the tax structure a little bit, maybe nudge things in the direction of building some new green energy resources. And Trump's is of course full all brakes, all gas, no brakes, straight towards the apocalypse, baby. Of course. But I think the point that I wanted to get across by looking at like Harris's policy, I won't dive into it now, but like was going to be about like the fact that the capitalist order as it currently exists just doesn't have like an investment in trying to actually combat this and trying to actually take this stuff seriously. Part of the reason I'm saying I'm not sure if this is like relevant to get into the specifics of the policies isn't just that like Harris lost. It's the like with the effects of climate change so directly in front of us, like with the Palisade fires, I feel like everyone has stepped into a kind of consciousness around this where it's just like we all get that we're not taking this problem seriously. I don't know if I need to prove this point to anyone. I'm going to take it as read that I've proved this point to everyone. We all agree, like, we're not taking climate change seriously enough.
That's right.
Let's talk instead about Bill Gates's proposed solution for a climate technology to darken the atmosphere so that less solar radiation is heating the planet.
I was about to do a bit where I was going to say, wait, don't tell me what it is. I'm going to imagine it. I'm going to come up with like a silly billionaire idea of like how to save the world from climate change.
He is a silly Billy and a silly billionaire. He's
silly Billy billionaire.
A silly William.
The silliest William. It was pretty much along the lines of that, of what you said. Like, I was thinking in my head, I was like, if I was going to do this bit, I would say, Bill Gates is going to build a big thing to stop the sun. Like, you know, it's the Mr. Burns thing.
Yeah, just
a giant umbrella.
Yeah, a big umbrella. Exactly. Yeah. So this is it's an idea that gets battered around by ruling class schools a fair bit. Just like, what if we just made the world darker? What if we just made it a bit more miserable for every living person? Because then we could carry on doing things exactly the same as we have been doing them, and we would just carry on getting like more and more like godlike levels of impossibly unequal power compared to an ordinary person. And I don't know, everyone hates it. It's the little like everyone disliked that meme little pop up, right? No, it's literally never going to get
famously
you would need to be able to do that.
People love it when in the midst of like a huge terrifying existential nightmare, like a little nerdy freak guy comes out of the woodwork and goes, why don't we build a big thing and it'll solve everyone's problems? Everyone loves it when that happens, don't they? They think that's really good and fun.
I mean, it's literally the premise of Snowpiercer. Like, it's just literally like before Snowpiercer, absolutely. Like what they did was they like put stuff into the atmosphere to darken things and cool things down, and then you get Snowpiercer. So no, that's stupid. That's not gonna happen. I'm sorry, everyone. I've brought kind of a silly energy to this now. I've just got
the silliest William.
I think it was silly William that like tipped me over. Okay, but it does bring us to the question of general like geoengineering, right? Like, which is, can we like turn the clock back on climate change? We can see climate change is happening right now. So if we want to change course, can we like spin in the opposite direction and start driving ourselves back in some way? I mean, I don't know if either of you have thoughts on like geoengineering, like trying to like make targeted changes to the planet in a way that would like turn back effects of climate change. All I really have to say about it is that like only a socialist government would want to and be able to do it because of their planned economy. That's the only thing I would really like. But,
like the only technology that claims to be able to do this at the moment is carbon capture, and that's not even fully realized as an idea, right? So in terms of like,
I want to talk about carbon capture in a little bit as a kind of brakes on the car kind of thing. But like,
I think that, you know, it's kind of one of those situations again where it's like, you know, should we really be saying the answer to all this technology is more technology? That really truly the answer is probably like, just let the earth sort its shit out once we've stopped, you know, doing all this nasty stuff to it. I think that it's just one of those situations that's so painfully obvious to me, that like we were birthed onto this perfect world. Everything in it is perfect. There's free food for everybody. Like, it's warm in the right places. It's cold in the right places. It's got all the right animals. It's just right. It comes right out of the ground. There's little silly furry guys.
Sometimes we have an ice age.
Yes, that's fine. Like, that just happens. But you know, and I just think that it's so absurd, isn't it? It's so painfully hubristic of humans to be like, we can fix it with more stuff.
Yeah, I feel like there is an in-between there. I feel like it's like technology is a broad thing. Like, technology could be a gigantic robot umbrella, or it could be like kind of actually investigating the way that we interact with the natural world, and even kind of like I guess, like, I mean, a lot of my take on this is informed by obviously like people that I'm surrounded by, so it tends to be more like, you know, like through a Maori worldview sort of thing, where it's like we're not separate from nature, like we're part of nature, and we can, you know, like the goal is obviously to protect the world and, you know, to be a healthy part of it, but that doesn't mean that we have to be completely hands off, you know. But my personal view is that we should, like, there are a lot of areas like what we're talking about with the floods down here, or even like the fires in Palisades. A lot of these things are as bad as they have been because people have altered the, you know, like literally altered the topography. Like they have changed, you know, like by redirecting rivers and emptying out, you know, like wetlands and things like that. Whereas I think that like it does, like, if we're looking at technology, it doesn't necessarily have to be like something that is like, you know, some kind of like machine that is going to solve it or process things or anything like that. It could be looking at ways of like, you know, like kind of like going back towards looking at like rebuilding ecosystems and rebuilding the land, but we have modern technology to, you know, to kind of evaluate the way that we do it and to help that process. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be completely technological or completely kind of Luddite
Absolutely.
and like old school and kind of like, you know, because I do know like a lot of people that will be like, and it's interesting because it tends to be like not indigenous people that say like, oh, we just need to get, you know, we just need to get rid of all this technology and we just need to go back to like, we just need to let the earth course correct sort of thing. Whereas I think there is a thing where it's like we can help restore the land to the way it was, but every, like a lot of the groups that I know, like a lot of even like tribal groups here, like I think a lot about Ngāti Kuri, who are a northern tribe who I fucking love. I've got some friends from them, and they so down here we have the Department of Conservation. It's like you know, government department that takes care of like the forests and birds and all that kind of shit like that. But some tribes and some hapu, Ngāti Kuri being one of them, actually said like, no, like we won't, the Department of Conservation is not going to be in control of our lands, that we're going to do it ourselves. So their like nature policy, the Te Taio, is kind of all self-managed, and they continue their own traditional practices, but they use contemporary equipment and tools. So, you know, like, so I've had seen friends that have done like, you know, traditional like forest maintenance and burning, or even like processing like beached whales using modern tools and equipment and things like that, but still honoring traditional methods and, you know, like all that kind of stuff. And like to me, that's like that's the way forward there. But
I think there's definitely a synthesis of like things we have discussed. Like we do not think we should like abandon modern medicine in order to no longer
to be clear,
like,
I'm not a radical fucking amprim. I don't think that we should be blowing supply lines and shit. You know what I mean? Like,
babe, we're not telling you off. We're not telling you off.
I know you're not. I know you're not. I just want everybody to be absolutely clear. Like, I was specifically talking about neoliberal, horrific capitalist solution in technology to climate change.
Exactly. Because like an example that I have heard is that like there is a termination shock currently going on. Like something has been a type of fuel in shipping has like they've stopped using it because of the pollutants, but the pollutants were creating a sort of reflective layer in the pollution they were doing, which was keeping like a lot of heating from like a lot of like solar rays from hitting the oceans. And like so for the sake of trying to like pollute less, they've stopped using this fuel. And now like there's a massive rise in ocean temperatures in the places where they've like stopped using it, which is like practically everywhere because it's global shipping. And I'm like, see, here I think less global shipping is immediately like a part of the solution, but you need many solutions to look at what you need to be doing here. Whereas like the person I was hearing this example from was saying, so isn't that interesting? There's a chemical that we could put over the oceans that would cool them down. Like that's a geoengineering potential. Like there's a possibility of using. And I'm just like, the real solutions are going to be very involved and complicated. Like they're going to involve doing a lot of different stuff like, people say like it's not rocket science. That's because rocket science requires for you to like build a bunch of different stages of something that's going to like generate the right amount of thrust or the right amount of time to do something perfectly timed, jettisoning a different thing that now has a different mass because it's changing in its like gravitational attraction, and therefore its overall weight and the forces of change that you're dealing with. And now you're no longer in an atmosphere, and the whole time you need to have a radio comm link, because there's a lot of different complicated things interweaving together. Is why like NASA is such a complicated like operation, right? In the same way, like climate change is a complicated thing. Like the solutions, the technological solutions as they will exist, are going to involve us like doing a lot of stuff like carefully timed in a really involved way with a lot of different methods at once. And if you're just saying something like, here's a chemical that could cool the earth down, right? Like whether it's up in the sky to just like Snowpiercer the world because you're Bill Gates, or it's like this specific thing over the sea. It's like, this is too simple a solution to actually make sense for the kind of problem that we're looking at.
So like an interesting resource that you can use for sort of thinking about this stuff is the game that we have promoted before and played on the stream, Half Earth Socialism. There are lots of there are lots of really, really cool like little cards in there. Like I'm just looking at one now, and there's one that's like biofabrication, which I think is supposed to imply instead of making things out of plastic, you make them out of, biomass. And also you've got things like cellular meat, which is another thing that people like to talk of quite a lot. Things like hempcrete, which is one of those really annoying like tech bro things that people love to bring up. Yeah, just grow loads of hemp, bro, make concrete out of it. Like the thing is, I think the thing to remember, like when we're having these discussions about like what technology can save us and what technology obviously do we not need, there is always going to be some kind of bad thing that happens as a result. Like, so, for example, if we changed airplanes, for example, to be electric, you would need these like massive fuck off batteries. And how would you get those batteries? You would have to mine for them, in places, so there would be exploitation.
Hey, but let's talk about nuclear. Let's talk about nuclear. It's a perfect example of like people thinking there is a cheap, immediate, direct solution that were like, and statistically it's not been that many people harmed by, and blah blah blah. And it's just like too simple a solution that you're not paying attention to like all the things that are actually complicated about it, and then also the impossibly disastrous like side effects if something goes wrong, and things go wrong on a long enough scale.
Like
nuclear always like reminds me of it's like some kind of like very fraught like fantasy magic. It's like this thing where it's just like, like our civilization was going great in the high point of our magic empire, and then the reckoning happened. It's just like like I know that a lot of those stories are like kind of like like metaphors for nuclear power and shit anyway, but it's just like you
like get an item in your inventory that says like robe of the ancient city, and then you look at it and it's like a California Bears jersey.
It's like some real like Gene Wolfe books of the new sun kind of shit. You just find out like say, oh yeah, no, this was Earth once.
I used to love people coming into my Twitch chat and trying to like shill for nuclear energy because it was like so fucking ridiculous. Like I just used to like I used to always like play out this kind of thought exercise with people who would say this, like, oh, we need to just go to nuclear. I used to say, well, I reckon when they invented coal power plants that they were looking at the smoke coming out the top and going, that seems pretty bad, but yeah, it's going in the sky. We don't have to worry about that. It's fine. And then like that's just what
train goes zoom
nuclear do. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, look at all that green stuff. What do we do with that? Just put it in the ground. It's fine. Like
I have seen people make arguments for like some kind of like transition program where it's like, oh, we build like a bunch of like nuclear power plants, and then we use that energy to to do other things to transition away. But I just like under capitalism, I know they would build those power plants. They'd probably build them shitty, and then they'd be like, solved. we got them. Like this is okay for now. Like you'd never see the rest of the plan. Like
in terms of what I. It's like the drawing of the horse, like it's half photorealistic, and then just like
this seems all right now.
And then there's a square that says like nuclear goes here, and you're like, what does that mean? Anyway, and what I expect to happen for the future, I do think that like nuclear energy will be some part of it. We have nuclear power plants now. There are plans to build more of them. There will be more nuclear energy in the future, but like thinking that nuclear energy is the solution is immediately falling into the same trap, which is just thinking that there is any like one solution to the situation, and there isn't. And like there are definitely going to be like nations in the future of people who are like, I don't know, a nation where people have built a lot of nuclear power, and like occasionally they have a nuclear disaster, and they also have like propped up like surviving capitalism, like strains of surviving capitalism and free market thinking within their like atomic powered state. And there's going to be a lot of shit wrong with it that is enabled by like the cheap and relatively clean seeming and low disaster rate energy source that they have, right? And there's going to be another nation where people have like changed to doing things like Cuba did after like all of the trade embargoes like completely shut down their ability to rely on like fossil fuels. And they're just like living in a more kind of like permaculture integrated like sustainable way where like people are doing a lot of their own farming, and people are like driving less cars, and they're just like, why are people doing it like that? It seems like such a horrible way to live. And the people in the nuclear nation are going to be like, why are these people just like not having all the joys of life that we can have, like Bitcoin? Anyway. I want to.
Go on, Soph. Yeah, no.
No, if it's another thought about this, you should say.
It was just another like the final thing that I want to say on nuclear is that like people are always like, someone just mentioned it in the chat, and I was wondering how long it would take for someone to say it in the chat, and I don't think they're saying it in terms of like, oh, this is what we need to do, but it's those two words together, crack fusion. Like people are always saying that. They're always saying if we crack fusion nuclear, then we'll be grand, we'll be great, we'll be sorted. But it's like, don't really have any time left for that. Like if we're gonna do this, what is it, cold fusion shit? Like that's what it's called. Like, oh, if we're gonna figure out cold fusion, it kind of needs to have happened like, I don't know, maybe like a year ago or more. Yeah, I love it when people say crack fusion. We're gonna crack cold fusion. No, you're not.
So I want to end out the discussion by talking first a little bit about carbon capture and storage, and then, just conclude on what as I said, I spoiled where we were going from the beginning, which is just like we just need a change to socialism. It's the only really viable thing here. But carbon capture and storage, the basic idea here is that like CO2 generated by burning fossil fuels will be caught and stored somewhere. That is the basic idea to it. How does it work? Yes.
It works because a guy.
It works, I promise. It definitely does.
What it does
is a guy, he breathes it all in, and then we fly him up to space and he breathes it out.
That's what it is. No, actually, what we do is we get the guy, he breathes it all in, and then he breathes it into a box that we put underground.
So we capture the carbon.
Yeah. And he's called Gavin.
And that's how you put it back in the earth. You just put it
underground. There's a lot of good writing about carbon capture and storage and how silly it is. I quite like this article by George Monbiot, so I'm going to read you a little bit from it. It's published on the Good Law Project's, friends of the show, Good Law Project blog. It says, last week, Rachel Reeves stood up in Parliament to announce a budget, quote, investing in our future, but the details the Chancellor laid out in her Red Book show that she's stuck in the past, with the government committed to blow £3.9 billion next year on a fossil fuel swindle that will drive climate breakdown. It's the down payment on a hustle called carbon capture and storage, CCS, a harebrained scheme to collect carbon dioxide emissions from industry and pump them into rocks under the North Sea that is set to rack up costs of £21.7 billion over the next 25 years. That's £21.7 billion price tag. That £21.7 billion price tag only covers the cost of building the infrastructure, not for running it. And judging by decades of costly failures, it's highly likely to increase. But the real problem with CCS is that it's an excuse for oil and gas companies to carry on producing fossil fuels. Labour's CCS plan includes £1 billion for making hydrogen from fossil gas, a technology that massively exceeds the low carbon hydrogen standard that is supposed to justify the whole project. Instead of accelerating decarbonisation, the government CCS con will lock in high emissions and fossil fuel dependency for decades to come. Because if we put all this fucking money, so I'm now no longer quoting from the George Monbiot didn't say this fucking money. If we put all that fucking money into building CCS, then like we would all feel that we had to use it, and using it means using more fossil fuels. So we have to remain dependent on fossil fuels, right? So this is like part of the nature of capitalism, is that like the money that we've invested into this stuff, it has to pay off in dividends. And the only dividends of putting like a cleaner filter on the the exhaust pipe of the fossil fuel industry is to keep running the fossil fuel industry. It is not like ultimately I don't know how to say, like if this were part of winding down dependence on fossil fuels and like winding down energy production from fossil fuels, that was done by a government, again, a socialist society that was invested in like in actually tackling climate change, it wouldn't be seen as an investment to pay dividends. It would be seen as like part of the like immediate stopping of the pollution of fossil fuels, so that we can get rid of fossil fuels as soon as possible. But being done by these fucking ghouls, like I don't know. Keir Starmer, one of my links that I have for this episode is Keir Starmer wrote an article in The Sun, which like is just impossibly ghoulish. I've gone over this on so many times on the show, but I'll just say again, my uncle died in the Hillsborough disaster. There's a reason that people in the north, especially Liverpool, boycott the Sun newspaper. It's because they're evil, and the Murdoch press is just like this propaganda wing of the bourgeois, of the bourgeois project. And Keir Starmer, a Labour Prime Minister, writing an article in the Sun is just unthinkably despicable. And he used it to talk about, quote, drum banging net zero extremists. So like this is the kind of politician that is trying to implement carbon capture and storage as a technological solution, pragmatic solution for climate change. It's not a solution. It's from someone who thinks that like achieving net zero is an extreme position and not necessary for our planetary survival. And it's just living in an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I even before you kind of got into it, like I hate that people like Keir Starmer will write something for The Sun. Like, I just hate the whole thing. Like, I hate all of this. Like, he's gonna, like, it's enough that we have to deal with these people in like the fucking halls of power, pretending that they care about the average working class person. Then they just gotta fucking write this shit. They want people to read it. Like, fuck off.
Yeah, it's yeah.
I know. It's just like, what is this? Like, who are you doing this for? You fucking freak! Like,
yeah. I think it will be like not that long before there's someone else running the show with the Labour Party.
It's interesting, all the like the fucking grooming gang stuff, like all the conspiracies around that popping off, and then seeing how it's like, these people like going like, well, who was in charge of all of that, who didn't investigate all that, and then it's like, oh, it's Keir Starmer.
Oh, who could have guessed?
But maybe because it would implicate the police and other local politicians on like a complete, like it's like, oh, the real conspiracy isn't that it's like, like that is Asian grooming gangs. The real conspiracy is that there's like a huge dereliction of duty to protect, children all across England, and that it's
almost like we're a horrific nonce island.
It's almost like like I'm sure any day now we might see something about one of Keir Starmer's good mates, perhaps a guy called Ivor Kaplan, perhaps getting a little bit of trouble. No, but it's like, this is what I mean, right? It's like,
my God.
Yeah. Anyway.
No, it is like our island was literally like it has been cursed. Like I I have a friend who has long COVID and respiratory issues because of it, and they just found like more mold in their house, like a new place they moved into. And I just had to say to them, like, Britain is trying its hardest to kill all of us. Like it's just like the nature of this, like, and ultimately, like the curse is the British Empire. Like it's just the like it's the fucking curse of the Nile. Like it's the pharaoh, it's the curse of the mummy. Like after all these years coming back after us,
swampy, moldy, fucking nonce island.
Yeah. I always actually think about that that Brass Eye episode that got banned off TV, where he goes, it's almost impossible to think of the British Isles without referring to them as the pedophiles. It's just like this ridiculous thing where it's just like,
you and I watched that episode of Brass Eye together like a few weeks ago.
Yeah. But that's
gosh.
This pedophile was disguised as a school.
Yeah. Absolute tangent. But it is interesting how Starmer's name pops up in all these places, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, to bring things to the point of the show as we're closing out the show, I just want to say, like, we already know what the solutions are here. Like, we already know that the solutions are to change the way that we're living, and the only kind of viable, sustainable society for the future is one in which people are living in a sustainable way. That means, like, changing how they relate to energy consumption, how they relate to capitalism, and building our own interdependence that is separate from the world that currently exists. And that work can be started any second by anyone, and is underway by a lot of people already. So I don't know, thoughts on building a better world?
I feel like we were talking about, I think it's basically how like BRICS is they're doing the third worldism sort of thing. Like, and I mean we've always spoken about that on the show, about how we thought that the real kind of the big moments are going to come from outside the imperial core, and I think that that's how it's going to be. And I feel like places like down here, Aotearoa, are kind of like, even though we're like very in the imperial core, like I feel like we're probably like, after, when it comes to the imperial core, it's probably going to come here first before it gets really into the heart of the empire. Even just in, I think, based on general vibes, Aotearoa has always been relatively kind of like we're part of the imperial core, but we're not really, we're kind of just on the border. But I definitely, I expect, I think that there's also there's a lot of like anti-China xenophobic kind of rhetoric that is being pushed in the imperial core at the moment, and I feel like it's going to come to the point where it's like, in the West, well, in the imperial core, we're going to be like seeing the very tangible harm of climate change and everything like that. And then it's going to be a point where it's like, oh, well, there's the only people that are doing something about it are these guys. Like, we need to either get with the program and start doing something ourselves, or smaller countries like New Zealand are going to start actually going like, oh, actually, maybe we're going to see what China and Cuba are doing. Maybe we're going to start kind of, moving over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because like America, Britain, or whatever, like doesn't tangibly have the option of like joining China's regime as a supplicant. Like it just is the enemy project too much.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that we can do is build something that is separate, like within, like separate from capitalist society as much as possible, really. Like it just doesn't I don't know.
Build dual power. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mule, any thoughts to round out the show?
No, I just, obviously agree with both of you. As we said when we started the show, a circle jerk is only good when everybody knows that that's what they're doing. That's what we're doing. I agree with both of you. You're really smart and good and based. You're my comrades, and I love you.
I love you too, babe.
That's the end.
Okay, well, in that case, for homework, I mean, like, you can read the books I mentioned if you want. But the most important stuff is going to be getting out into your community, knowing people, meeting people, and thinking about how you make, a sustainable way of living. It's time to promote the Patreon again. So it's really important for me to say us continuing to be able to properly do this show, and also expand this show and do more exciting stuff with it, is made possible by our supporters on patreon.com/red_planet. There are various different tiers you can support the show at, but at the highest one, which is called Sickos, you get a personal thank you message at the end of every episode. Thank you to our Sicko level supporter, Risk Inverse. There is Patreon bonus content available. There are a few episodes now where we're just hanging out and chatting. Tim and I had a wonderful chat together just the other morning. It was the earliest recording of Red Planet of 2025. Tim told me about Karanga Happy Road, and like we chatted about like the history of like alt cultures and like what they have to do with people who work jobs that are working on people's bodies. Like Tim is a tattoo artist. I have experience with sex work, and that's kind of what we, the conversation wound up, I don't know, exploring some interesting stuff. I thought it was really, really interesting.
Yeah. I thought it was fun. It was a lot less of a kind of structured thing where you just kind of like followed some threads and talked about bodily autonomy, outsider subcultures, and all that kind of stuff.
I'm enjoying having like the more freeform episodes where we just hang and chill. It's a good time.
I think we're gonna do another one sometime soon about games, about what games we've been playing.
That should be really fun. Hopefully all three of us. Definitely all three of us are gonna be next week, a regular stream time in the Patreon Discord, hanging out and doing the Star Trek stream that we do, which is also bonus content available on Patreon. Mule and I are big Trekkies and have been showing Tim Star Trek Deep Space Nine a couple of episodes at a time. We haven't actually picked out our episodes just yet. So if anyone in the Patreon Discord has like strong opinions about what would be good episodes to show Tim, we don't yet totally know what we're watching. But we're going to be doing that next week. Like I say, there's a lot of exciting stuff on the Patreon. Please check out patreon.com/red_planet. The episode I was talking about, which was just me and Tim, which we recorded earlier this week, just dropped on the Patreon right now.
Like literally like minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
So please check out the Patreon. It helps make the show possible, and it will help make the cool stuff we have planned for the future possible too. But for now, I want to know where we can get more of DJ Mule.
Whoa, thanks, Soph. You can get me linktree.ee/DJMUEL. As I alluded to earlier, I'm going to be starting streaming again, probably later this week, maybe next week. So would really appreciate some support in checking me out. I'm going to be trying to stream around about like 12 o'clock midday time, UK time, because I've kind of gotten into a really good habit of getting up early and doing stuff in the morning and in the day. So going to be getting back on the streaming horse, because I'm probably definitely going to be unemployed tomorrow. I'm certainly not going to be fucking working for these cunts anymore. So there you go. So please support me on Twitch and on YouTube. I'm also going to be working on my new video, which is about Bastard Landlord influencers. I'm going to be starting that tomorrow as well. Well, not starting it, but I've already written it, and I just need to basically start recording it and double check some bits of the script, and that should be out later on this week or perhaps next week. So check out the YouTube as well. Check out my previous videos, and also head over to patreon.com/DJMUEL, and you could support me on there as well and chuck me some dough. But I want to know about Sophie. Where can I find out more about Sophie from Mars?
Wow. Thanks, babe. Yes, Sophie from Mars is what you should look me up as on YouTube. That is my main thing I do is write video essays on YouTube. And so I've kind of changed the way that I'm doing things going into 2025, and I'm investing like writing time into projects that I really care about, which is a thing I've been like trying to do year in, year out for a really long time. It's just say like, actually, I only really care about these things. And so like, they're going to like come out beautiful. Like I'm actually going to write these things well if I write those things. And that isn't going to be the only stuff that's going to be on YouTube, but I will be like doing some more stuff where I've written a little bit, but I'm like using a lot of notes and like recording a little bit more free form. So actually like in a few days, I'm just going to sit down and record some thoughts about like Trump before the inauguration happens and get it up just before the inauguration happens. And like I tried writing that for ages and ages and ages, and like as the political situation and like the MAGA civil war and all this shit happened, like it just kept on changing like what I wanted to say so much that I was like, this isn't going to be like a thing I should actually be investing writing time into. So there will be stuff like that ongoing on my YouTube channel. You can support me at patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. But there will also be big projects I'm working on, such as a video essay about the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, my favorite sci-fi series, which I've been rereading recently, and I've got a really fun plan for a video that actually I'll say now, and hopefully not say too much and spoil it for everyone. But I'll say just the one time now that like I'm going to use Kerbal Space Program to simulate a bunch of shit from the series because I've been getting really into Kerbals over the holiday period.
I was thinking about that when you were talking about rocket science. I was
that's why.
She's Kerbal pilled.
I am Kerbal pilled. And so anyway, it's a secret just for Red Planet heads. Anyway, so I'm working on that. I'm really excited about that. It's like it's some of my favorite books ever. It is a part of why my channel is Sophie from Mars, and I'm just looking forward to doing that. It's gonna be fun. I'm also working on and have been working on for a long time a big essay project called The Mad and the Mentally Ill, which is about my own theory of like madness and mental illness as I understand it, and what like getting better means and how it relates to getting free. That will be available. Half of the essay in text form is already available on my Patreon. The rest of it will be available when it's fully written. The video will be available early there when it's done, or as it's being produced. So patreon.com/Sophie patreon.com/Sophie from Mars is where you find that, and my link tree is linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars if you wanted to just send me money directly. But for now, right this moment, I'm okay. So if you wanted to send one of us money directly, go support Mule's stream when he starts streaming. In the meantime, check out my stuff, subscribe to the Patreon for upcoming stuff. You'll see it. It's going to be great. And Tim, what should people be watching out for from you?
So if you want to find me on Twitter or Blue Sky, I'm Dread Conquest, or if you want to find me on YouTube or Twitch, Conquest of Dread. But I haven't been super active on either of those for a while. Just super busy with my day job tattooing, which means I haven't had an opportunity to stream outside of Red Planet stuff for a really long time. Would love to do it, but it's just not really on the plate at the moment. But aside from that, I have been working on, like, people that have been following us for a while have known that I've been working on a tabletop RPG for a while now, which is it's very close to being done. Like, it's pretty much just like it needs like a little bit of like play testing and refining. I even have like printed copies of it. I don't have one at hand. I flicked through one on the stream the other week though, which is really, really cool. But it's like 200 pages, fully illustrated, everything. It's just a huge chunk of work that is almost completely done. So that's going to be released soon. If you want to see more about it, you can jump over to Twitter, and it's Twitter at DarkRPG2000, and it's kind of like a dark dystopian future kind of thingy, but it's very it's very relevant to the themes of Red Planet, and it's a lot of fun as well. So a little bit more play testing, and then that'll be released, which is one of my goals for the year, is to completely get that all released and printed and out to everyone. So I'll be talking about that more as we go through the year. Otherwise, that's it though. Okay. Thanks for tuning in.
Wonderful show, everyone. Thanks for hanging. Next week, as I say, we will be hanging out in the Patreon Discord, showing Tim some Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Don't miss it. It'll be great.
Showing him some weird little guys.
The rest of the audience, we'll see you the week after that. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.